Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, spirits of all ages, welcome to the BlunderSpeaker Show. Yes, indeed. Welcome back, everyone, to the BlunderSpeaker Show. Absolute pleasure to have you here. This is, of course, the show where we talk everything about Spirit Island. Everything is done in one take, and we have all the blunders, all the mistakes, all the everything included in the show. So, yeah, no time for practicing. Well, actually, I've been practicing and setting up lots of things, which I'll get to in a moment, but we've no time for reruns. We have no time to wait until this evening, so I'm doing this in the middle of the day for reasons which I won't go into. All sorts of stuff happening in our house today, so please do forgive me if you've got doorbells ringing, kids crying, all sorts of stuff. We are today, it's what are we, Wednesday, I believe, 26th of March. I think we're Wednesday at this stage. We might be Tuesday. I'm losing track of today's. I think we're Wednesday, 26th of March. It's now 25 past 12 in the afternoon. My name, of course, is Tepid Goose. I am your host, as I always am. Absolute pleasure to have you back here. If you're coming back to the show, welcome back. Welcome on in. Get your slippers, get your tea, get your coffee. I've got my my coffee ready to go. Over on the side here, that's my beverage of choice to start the episode. At least we've got one or two others in the background, which we'll get to, of course. Yeah, look, it's a pleasure to have you back. And if, of course, you're new to the show, hopefully you're here and you've had this recommended from somebody else. If indeed you do enjoy what you see, please do, of course, hit the like button as you go along. And if you haven't already, please do think about subscribing to the channel as well. But that's the intro. That's what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. I'm about to tell you what we're doing. That's who I am, and that's what the show is. Let's keep moving and talk about what we're actually here to talk about today, which is, of course, the elements. I'm a little out of my element with everything that's been going on. So as I say, the elements in Spirit Island are what's up for this action-packed show today. I did say in previous episodes we're going to start doing a summary at the start of the episode, so I have that planned. I have that right in front of me here. So what we're going to do today, we're going to start with a little bit of an overview, what the elements are, what they mean, how they work, all that kind of stuff. We've got a long community inputs section today, which is really, really good. There's lots of awesome inputs, and clearly everybody is very enthused and animated and engaged and energized by elements, which is fantastic to see. And we then will do a bit of a data breakdown. So you know me by now, hopefully. I like analysis. I like data breakdowns. I like really digging into it. And I've gone through and I've done some kind of data points around the elements. And we are going to look to crown a winner. And you're going to find out what the actual best element is once and for all. So really excited by that. I think there's some cool data there. And we'll go through that, of course. And at the end of the episode then, assuming we have a bit of time, because this may be a slightly longer one, I will be doing a little bit of a breakdown on my special episode. So I had a special episode during the week. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at that. If you haven't already, I'll put a link to that one a little bit later on. But that was, of course, an episode with Starlight and Elemental Invocation and all that kind of good stuff. So, you know, I really had this in mind since the very beginning. I really wanted to get in and kind of break all of this element stuff down. And to be honest with you, coming into it, I really didn't know what to expect. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to take this whole thing. So it kind of evolved as I was going along. We'll talk about that as we get through the episode. But really happy how it all came together, and really hope you enjoy the show as well. And we're going to start, first of all, with a big old sup of coffee. It is, of course, as I say, the afternoon, so I can't be drinking beer before I've had my coffee. You know, I do, of course, have my can of beer ready to go. It's a brown ale, so we're not going too fancy. We're going something a little bit brown for the afternoon. We're not going mad on the lagers or any of that kind of stuff. We're keeping it a little bit subtle and a little bit smooth. With a brown ale there, but that's for after my brown coffee. So we're starting with the coffee. I need my energy, as you can clearly tell. I'm massively lacking in energy, but no, in truth, I was meant to record this last night. And I was kind of struggling with a migraine for yesterday and into today as well, which hasn't fully gone. So I'm a little bit all over the place, truth be told. I've been I've hit my meds. I've kind of come through, I think, the worst of it there, but not ideal in all honesty. But look, it is what it is. Migraines are unfortunately a big part of my life. So hopefully we won't hit the stage of if any of the listeners are familiar with solo playthroughs. I of course have mentioned solo playthroughs and Greg multiple times on the show. He had one particularly unfortunate episode that he did a playthrough of where he was working himself through a migraine, and by the end of the episode he could barely talk. He was slurring his words. He sounded like he was super drunk. You just saw him just go slowly and fall off a cliff by the end of the thing. He had to stop playing at the end because he couldn't even talk. It was crazy. Hopefully none of that sort of stuff is going to happen to us today. I'm going to get my caffeine into me. As I say, I've had my drugs, all that kind of stuff, so hopefully we're good to go. I do have a slightly different setup here, by the way. I should mention that at the start. That's what I was talking about, being a bit out of my element. I had to spend quite a bit of time this morning before starting, kind of rearranging the setup on the rig here just a little bit. And this is off the back of an issue that came on the playthrough itself. So had some issues with audio towards the second half of the playthrough. And I couldn't really quite figure out why it was. And my best guess is that I had my microphone sort of down as I usually have it on the table, but I think I may have had it pushed a little bit too close to the kind of, you know, plugs and wiring, and there's a lot of kind of different kind of voltages and signals sort of all flowing around this part of the table. So I'm thinking that perhaps there was some kind of radio frequency or some other kind of it was picking up some interference from some of that. So what I've tried to do for today, and I'm hoping this is going to work out, is I've mounted my mic back up in front of me here, so hopefully that's giving it a cleaner and a better sound. I have mounted, instead of, because I had to kind of move some of the rigging equipment, so I've now put my light source directly in front of me, which is kind of warm already, and it's a bit of a warm day outside. As you can see, I've got my curtains closed, but it's not a cool day, and I don't want to have that window open to obviously get all the background noise. So you know, please do forgive me if I'm sweating profusely. I'm all over the place by the end of this. That's just gonna have to be one of those things. Hopefully the beer keeps me cool. Hopefully the sparkling water keeps me cool. The coffee probably heat me up in the short term, so none of that is particularly ideal. But anyway, I digress. We're how many minutes? 7.5 minutes in, and it just seems impossible for me to start an episode without all this kind of messing at the start. But anyway, look, let's get into it. Let's start, and we are going to start with the element of sun, which is, of course, the first element in the 8. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give a very, very simple breakdown, a little bit like with the Adversary episode where I kind of talk through the panel and sort of what it is. We'll talk a little bit through the what here. And then, of course, we'll go through and we'll talk about the how and the why and what it all means later on. But just sort of in very basic terms, I've got each of the 8 elements broken down here into sort of the basic description of what comes in the rulebook. You know, I pulled this off the wiki website, and hopefully it matches to the rulebook. If anybody knows exactly word for word, I'm taking this from the wiki, not from the rulebook, but this is kind of the basic description of what the game tells you each of the elements are. And for each of the 8, I've picked out one single card from the minor power deck to give a little bit of a flavour around what that looks like, or some of that looks like. Of course, there's each element represents a lot of different things, but I've sort of picked out 8 that I think give a good indicator of how an element is felt within a card. And of course we'll talk about sort of the texture of elements and sort of what they provide for the game and how they resonate in the game, and all of those kind of things we'll get into. But just kind of briefly to begin with, we'll just go through the 8. So I'm starting with sun. And I have a card here, but we'll get to that in a moment. Sun is listed as the element of day, light, heat, dominance, command, and constancy. And they say that sun shares the trait of constancy with earth, which is a very odd thing that they've done in this game, because it's the only one that they sort of list as being very clearly shared with another element. Now, thematically, maybe just Eric, and I know Eric is kind of mostly responsible for how all of the elements came together in this game. He obviously felt there was a reason to really strongly link those two, and he thinks the way he thinks about this game is just beyond my comprehension in terms of how he brings all of this theme and lore and flavor from the mechanic through to the thematic, and how he ties all of this in is just, we'll obviously spend 2 hours waxing lyrical right now about how just incredibly well this is done, but I just found it weird, and I'm starting with a slightly jarring thing, because it is one of them slightly jarring things where that one specific trait is shared between the two. So anyway, not sure why he's done that. I don't hate it or anything, I just find it a little bit strange that he's picked that one outlier, because it doesn't really get listed by any of the others. But anyway, so that's how sun works. Light, heat, obviously day, that kind of thing. Obviously we're going to hear about moon, which is quite the opposite. And these two, actually, just to note right away as well, were two that were added after the fact. So the game did start with 6, and they sort of added in the day and the night, or the kind of light and the dark, as an extra layer on top of the other 6 that were in the game. And we've heard Eric speak multiple times about how important that change was. And it feels a little, if you look at it, it feels crazy to kind of imagine the game without it, because it's so obvious, and it's so it works so well in so many of the cards that you see in the game. But anyway, I've got one card here which I pulled out, which is Call to Bloodshed, and I'll of course bring it up on the screen here. This is a sun card, obviously, among others. This is a card that's very much about that command that we talked about. So sun is very much about command, commanding the Dahan, and they have some amount of commanding of invaders and kind of pushing invaders as well as part of the lore, but it is more about commanding Dahan. Clearly here you can see ThunderSpeaker in the art. I do believe that's ThunderSpeaker, it is, yeah. And she is kind of leading the Dahan. In this card, obviously, we've got the element of gathering Dahan and moving them. So gathering them as part of the kind of come together, as part of a push, and a war cry, so to speak. But you've also got then it's that ordeal damage. So here there's an element of all of these cards where you can see there's the mechanical element of the card. And clearly here there's an element of either we're gathering, or if we have enough already, we're going and attacking. So you can see there mechanically how those two things come together, but then tied in with the thematic, which is the sun and the command. You've got there the animal, which is very much related to kind of humanity and people and that type of thing. So we'll get to that, of course, in a few moments, but that's in there. And of course you've also got fire, which is very much about aggression, and things like that. So again, just it's quite simple in a sense, but if you just look and go through the deck is just absolutely chock full to the very brim of every card. When you just pick it up, you look, and the elements just make sense. And to make that many cards of 100 card minor deck, I'm already starting to get into, going crazy about how just amazing this is. But the feat that he has achieved, just to right up in front to talk about how well he and the team have managed to achieve a list of 100 cards that tie perfectly mechanics to thematics, using these elements, and find a way to balance all of that with all of the elements, and make sure that there's the right level of balance across all of the cards, and that you don't push one thing too far in another. To do that across 8 different elements, across 100 cards, and to maintain a level of mechanical game balance in a game is, frankly, mind-boggling to me. I mean, I literally cannot say strongly enough how I just can't believe that they can manage to do that. It is astounding to me, and it's unheard of in any game that I've seen or heard where they have managed to do something like this. Like, I played Magic, as I talked about before, and I'm already getting into Magic. We're barely out of the first few minutes of the show. I'm already talking about Magic, but clearly here there's a very close tie, because Magic has its own kind of color pie, and it has its own level of color alignment to what the abilities do and all that. So there is quite a lot of similarity between how Magic and Spirit Island do it. But Magic achieves nowhere near, and this is one of the most successful games ever. And for me, it achieves nowhere near the same level of tying. Like if you pick every single card and go down through them and look how well they've combined all of the different elements into something that really feels exactly like the elements that are written on it, and not just for the sake of lore. It's not just the storytelling. To achieve that with, as I say, the mechanical balance, it's really frankly astonishing. So that's just one example. I've got 7 others, as I say here, and I'll kind of go through them. I wanted to just start right off the bat with how well I believe this is done, and I think I've got a slide in 2 slides where I started, where I was supposed to talk about that, but I couldn't help myself for getting into it already because that's just the way this is. Let me just finish my coffee before it goes cold here. Right, that's that done. And that's sun done. Second up, we've got moon. As I say, moon, kind of the opposite to sun. It's about night. It's about darkness. It's about dreams. Cycles and transformation are the kind of 5 listed things here. So some interesting things happening there. It's not just dark and dreams and scary. A lot of it is kind of darkness and scariness and fear. But you've also got things like cycles. You've got things like transformation. What I have here for my card for moon is cycles of tide and time. It's also a sun card, so it's a sun and a moon card here. And this is a card which is targeting coastal land. And if there are Dahan, add a Dahan. And if there are no Dahan, remove a blight. Very, very similar to a card from Fractured Days. I'm sure, actually, now that I say it, that's a Branching Claw card, isn't it? I was about to say that almost certainly came with Jagged Earth, with Fractured Days, but it actually didn't. Now that I look at it, but I'm sure there was work in the background where the 2 of those things were linked, even if they weren't published together. But very, very much akin to the type of mechanic that you see from Fractured Days here, and the same kind of storytelling elements involved here. Where if it's a certain cycle, for example, a cycle where there are Dahan in this particular coastal area by the sea, if there's Dahan, you're going to sort of populate and you're going to create more Dahan. That's giving you the idea of a cycle of time. Then if there are no Dahan, so if the Dahan have left, remove a blight. So it gives you this idea of the Dahan have left because it's a blighted land, something like that. And then it's kind of like over time the land regenerates and kind of it gets clean and it becomes more natural again, which is very much a kind of a water-based mechanic of healing. But again, so you can see here how you've got sun in terms of the light and the dark, so that's giving you that concept of light and dark from the 2 elements. You've got the water, which is kind of healing, and of course it's coastal, so it's by the sea, and very much the art is kind of giving you that idea of the cycle of the moon and the tide and all that kind of stuff. So again, very, very rich storytelling in the card, which is supported very clearly by the elements. So up next then we have fire, and fire is about heat, anger, destruction, those kind of things that we would sort of associate fire with in almost any game. But you've also got then desire, and you've got violent change. So fire is very much about change as well, and that's supported in a lot of things in the game, something like transforming wildfire, for example. What I picked out here is a card which gives you a little bit of multiple things again. It's Purifying Flame. This is a card which it's actually sun again. I think I've ended up with 5 different sun cards on here, but that's okay. It's sun, fire, air, and plant. In this case then we've got the fire is coming from, so it's a purifying flame, this idea of purity, purifying. It's again similar to how kind of wildfire, the spirit works, Heart of the Wildfire. It's got this idea of if the land is already damaged, you can deal more damage. So you get that sort of concept of damage, more damage, spreading flames, that kind of idea. But then you've also got then if the target land is a mountain or a sands, you may instead remove a blight. So again, similar to how Heart of the Wildfire works, it's this concept of fire spreading and then sort of blazing and scorching the land, but then the renewal that comes after it, which is very much a thing that occurs in nature, where sort of you'll purposely scorch out sections of brushland and things like that to enable the sort of the verdant lands to come beneath. So you've kind of got that concept happening here within this card, where if it's a mountain or sands, which is a bit more of the kind of dry and barren type landscapes compared to the forests or the jungles or the wetlands. So if you've got that kind of concept of it's already a barren space that's already been scorched, then you can go ahead and you can kind of renew the land. So again, storytelling, time over time. Again, this idea of Spirit Island and the scope of a game of Spirit Island being very much a long period of time, years, decades, even if I'm not mistaken. Told perfectly within a card here. And of course you've got this idea of air being an element of time, which we'll get to, and we have the plant being the renewal, the verdancy of the land, that kind of thing, but mixed in with, of course, the fire from that. So really, really nice storytelling on that one as well. And I have to admit, I took a lot of this for granted, in truth, coming into this episode. I've been playing Spirit Island for years now. I've played almost 200 games, as I said before. And I never really take the time to do this, which is to stop and look and really study the cards and really think about how those stories are coming out from this. So this has been a really nice experience for me. I've really enjoyed this, stopping and doing this analysis of what the elements are, why they are, all of that, and really looking at the cards and sort of how it comes about. So I didn't have much to say on this, in truth, coming into this episode, and a lot of what I really want to say about the elements and which ones are the best and all of that is going to come from data rather than my own personal perspective. And that's from experience, as I say, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But also then I wanted to give the people in the community who really did have a lot of things to say about this, let them have the say in terms of what it means to them. And there's plenty, as I say, for that to sort of come out. Next up then we have air, which is sorry, I'll get to the card in a moment. So air is about wind. It's about sky, the air, obviously. It's about sound. It's about distance, speed, trickery, and thought. And I'm pretty sure I saw time listed somewhere as part of air as well. Maybe that's more moon in terms of cycles, something like that. But yeah, so you've got you've got this idea of distance, grandeur. You've got speed. Clearly, air is about speed and trickery and thought. So it's the element of the mind, which I love, and coming from a Magic the Gathering background, if you are familiar with that game, I'd be familiar with blue in that game being a lot similar to air in this game, which unfortunately it doesn't link blue to water. Blue in Magic is very much about that. It's all about thinking. It's about outwitting. It's about knowledge. It's about all those kind of things. So I think air is very much more in that kind of space within this game. Trickery and thought is very much the space for air. And what I've got here to showcase air is a card, Sky Stretches to Shore, which is the fourth Sun card in a row, which might be saying something. And this is, I've talked about before, one of my favourite minor powers in the whole deck, maybe second, only behind Gifted Nature's Connection, which is my favourite. Gifted Nature's Connection won't be part of the episode today because it doesn't really fall under any of the elements. It's kind of all of the elements, so I didn't really take any time to sort of bring them into the show. In truth, maybe I should have. I maybe should have had a dedicated section for the cards that are lacking elements, or maybe all of the elements in a sense, and there are a couple. So I don't have anything in this episode that are actually dedicated to that. So I'm not going to disrupt this section right now, but if I think of it later on, I might come back and mention those. But for now, we've got Sky Stretches to Shore. It's sun, air, water, and earth. So 4 elements, and 4 element cards are really, really good on minors. I've actually put a bunch of them in here because obviously storytelling and all that, it kind of made sense for this. And this is, you target a spirit as opposed to a land, and then this turn target spirit may use a slow power as if it were fast, or vice versa. And then target spirit gains +3 for targeting coastal lands only. Now, this is if I'm not mistaken, if this is the only card in the game which will allow you to make a fast power slow. There is at least one other ability that has a very similar thing going on. It's Grinning Trickster has an innate that they can turn from fast to slow or slow to fast, and they can kind of have it both ways essentially. But I don't believe there's any other ability that lets you do this. There are a couple, of course, that can make slow to fast. There's a variety of them, but making fast to slow, this is the only one that does it. So I really like that, actually. I like that there's a minor in here that has that very unique effect, and even slow to fast is a very unique effect. This is the only minor power in the game that can do it. So very much, again, about mind, about thinking, some kind of trickery, some kind of way to adapt what you're doing and change the nature of something else. It also gives you this idea of targeting coastal land, so it covers that kind of distance idea as well. So it gives you an idea of distance to the coast from an inland. It also, of course, brings very much an idea and a feeling of coming down from the sky. So the artwork here, I meant to check this. I don't know who that is in the artwork. It kind of looks like Keeper, and I can't really imagine Keeper flying through the sky here. So it can't possibly be Keeper, but it does look like Keeper. If anybody knows who that is in the artwork, please do let me know, because it's a very familiar looking face. So it's almost certainly one of the spirits in the game, or some kind of element of the lore. But you've got this idea of kind of coming from the sky, stretching out to the shore. So absolutely love that one. Again, you've got the idea of the sky being the sun. You've got the earth in there being the earth. You've got the water for the kind of coming out to the shore, to the coast, and kind of air tying the whole thing together. So wonderful card, very, very, very strong card, fantastic card, and great storytelling happening as part of all of that. So we'll continue on, and we'll move to water. I was actually planning on doing these quite quickly, but now that I'm getting into it, I'm really, I'm feeling it, feeling good. The coffee's kicking in. Okay, we've got water up next, and water is the fifth element, which is a great movie if anybody is familiar. We have water is about rivers. It's about ocean, of course, as well. It's about fluidity. It's about fertility as well. Empathy, which I'm not sure I can picture a card with empathy in there, but very much healing and disease are huge elements of water as well. So fertility of the land, the healing of the land, but also the disease of the land. Water is very much the disease spirit, and this idea of disease being spread, fluidity spreading. Water is very much about damage to each is one of the kind of key abilities that come from water, where it's about flooding out, dealing damage to everything, damage to all invaders, all buildings, and so on. So I've got one card here which ties a lot of that in together. It's the card Infested Aquifers. It's 1 cost at range 0. It's again 4 elements, so you've got moon, water, earth, and animal this time. Target any land. If target land has any disease, 1 damage to each invader. So there's a lovely little bit of lore straight off the bat there. If you're in an area with disease, deal damage to everybody. So again, spreading, getting the disease out there. And then when we're talking an infested aquifer, so clearly here the storytelling element is this is disease in the water mains, so people are drinking the diseased water and so on. Really, really strong. Or if the target land is mountain or wetland, you can add a fear and add a disease. So again, this is an idea of sort of disease spreading and disease coming into the water. So you've kind of got both elements at play here. And of course, the card itself It's not a particularly strong card. Don't like this card very much to play with, but it's a wonderful storytelling element, and it's a really strong thematic card here, and it plays off itself, right? So one of the times, or sort of some of the only times I really ever remember using this card in a game is where I was able to, at the end of a reclaim cycle, play the aquifers, use it to place the disease into a mountain or a wetland, and then reclaim the card, play it the following turn in the same land, and go ahead and deal the damage to everybody. So it's got that element of bring the disease and then use the disease to spread out to the thing, which is clearly here just steeped in flavour and absolutely magnificent. So that's water. Next up is earth, sixth element. It's the element of land, strength, constancy again, stasis, and resilience. So very much about this idea of constancy. For me, earth is more the constant, the element of constancy, which is just about rigidity. It's about ruggedness. It's about stasis, just staying the same, just absolutely not. Just the picture of stones unyielding defiance, like that defiant kind of rugged, harsh landscape of just absolutely not. I'm refusing to budge here. I'm resilient, and I'm a big old stone. So that for me is where constancy kind of comes a little bit more. It feels a little bit more strongly to me. It sort of feels like it should have been an earth thing alone, and clearly, of course, we have a whole bunch of the kind of earth based spirits in the game. Will have a reclaim option, reclaim all G1 generally, which also allows you to place a presence. So that's very much coming from this idea of constancy. So, there's this idea of always there, always on, always present, and from a sort of gameplay perspective, placing the presence every single turn is this idea of this kind of big and growing thing. It's just always there. Whereas other spirits, obviously, they're not necessarily placing presence all the time. There's this maybe concept or idea of cycles for them where they kind of come and go and that type of thing. Whereas the ever growing presence is very much about the earth. So I really like that. It's maybe one of the simpler elements in the game. What I have here is a card which I really like, and it's giving a slightly different, it's leaning into a slightly different element of earth. In this case, it's the card Gold's Allure, which is zero cost. It's quite a strong card. The guys talked about this on the Spirited Discussion podcast fairly recently, and they've made a couple of jokes about it. I think Kaelin was saying that he doesn't like this card very much. I think this card is very good, actually. I think this is quite a strong card here, so I really do quite like picking this up. It is a fire, earth, and animal. So three tags. It's range 1, slow power, target a mountain. So this is very specific targeting. In this case, you have to target a mountain, and it does gather an explorer and a town, and then you can add some strife. Now this again, it's one of them things where you don't really think about the card. You're playing the game, you pick it up, you play the card, you go, yeah, okay, I'll do some stuff, I'll gather some guys in there. Good card, effective card. I can maybe solve 2 lands with this card, so that's why I like it. But when you stop and think about the card, Gold's Allure. So clearly here you've got the artwork of kind of somebody coveting the gold and the sort of the greed in their eyes of the glowing gold. And it's like the lore of the card is that you're targeting a mountain, so you're gathering people to the mountain where there's obviously a cave or something like that, where there's gold in the cave, and they're going ahead and they're getting greedy. So they're gathering into the mountain, they're conglomerating on the mountain, and then the strife is kind of making them go a bit crazy. So that's a bit the kind of the greed and the craze of the greed coming from the gold, which is just it's magnificent. It's just wonderful. And again, this is a perfect example of they've told a story with a card. And by the way, elementally here, clearly you've got the earth of the mountain. You've got the animal tag is representing the humanity, which we talked about, and the element, the nature of humanity. And then you've got the fire, which is about greed and passion and that kind of thing, which we heard about from the fire element. So again, elementally, it's perfect. And you've got just this amazing story being told by this card, which also, from a mechanical standpoint, has very specific numbers. It's it's tweaked. It's range 1. It's not range 2. It's not range 0, right? So you can just think about when you're creating this game and the developers are going through, and well, starting from Eric, of course, who's done most of the work around a lot of these cards, and of course he hands over then, and the development tweak the numbers on these things. But just imagine like how they've managed to get, and this is one of 100 cards, right? You have to find a way to bring all of these stories into a balanced game that's not too strong. Like, do you gather only an explorer, or do you gather an explorer and a town, or so on and so on, right? So finding the ways to get all of these numbers right from a gameplay perspective and still maintaining that level of storyline in the game. Again, I just can't say good enough things about it. It's just amazing. So we'll keep going because I can't say enough good about it, so I'm just going to keep saying good things about it. So we'll go on to plant. Plant is our seventh element. And plant is about, I already mentioned a little bit, verdancy, growth, entwining. So you've got this element of entwinement here, if entwinement is a word. I'm not fully sure. And regeneration. So again, there was a little bit of that from kind of healing in water. You've got a similar thing here with regeneration from plant. Very much about the kind of the flora of the island. So plant life, you see plant represented in kind of trees and things like that. A lot of the kind of plant-based spirits are, keepers of big tree. Obviously green is kind of a bush and shrubs and sort of vines and all of that. And some of the others are very clearly based in eyes watch from the trees. Again, trees. So you've got that kind of element of lure is wilderness. It's deep in the wilderness. We have Call to Trade here is the card I've picked for plant. Call to Trade is an amazing card. I just love this card. I get so greedy for this card. I just always want to take it. It's funny as well. I think I've mentioned this before, but the guys on the Kindred Spirit podcast years ago, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt from it being years ago, but they mocked this card multiple times as part of their show. And I think I said this in the podcast already, but I'd love to know whether they've changed their mind on it over the years, because they talk about this being one of the worst cards in the deck that they never use. And for me, it's one of the best cards in the deck. I just love this card. But anyway, it's a 1 cost. It's air, water, earth, and plant. And it's range 2 into a target land with Dahan. So again, storytelling has to be part of the Dahan, right? And so what you do here is you may gather another Dahan, and if the terror level is 2 or lower, gather a town, and the first ravage in target land becomes a build there instead. So again, let's talk about the separate with the mechanics on the thematics for a moment here. So from a mechanical standpoint, you're looking at a land that has Dahan, and you can gather another if you wish. If the terror level is 2 or lower, you gather a town. You have to gather a town, and then the first ravage in the land becomes a build instead. So it's a ravage skip, right? Mechanically, when you play the game, you pick it up, you go, yeah, Call to Trade, happy days, draft that one, go there, I'll stop that ravage, I'll build up a bit more stuff in there, I'll add a whole bunch of plastic in the land, but I'll worry about it later. You discard the card and you move on. Stop and think about what this means from a thematic standpoint for a moment, and it's just amazing. So you target a land with Dahan. So you're looking and you're going and you're finding one of the local Dahan villages, for example. You may gather a Dahan. So if you'd like to, you can bring more Dahan into this village for what's about to happen here. You can have people gathering around. You can have this concept or idea of a gathering. If the terror level is 2 or lower, so if the invaders haven't gone crazy and they aren't scared out of their minds already. So if things are relatively calm on the island and it's early on in the invasion, so to speak, you can gather a building. You can gather a town. So you bring a town. That's an idea of bringing lots of people to this village. So you've got the village, you're gathering the people to the village, and then the first ravage. So rather than an aggression and rather than a fight, you're now going to have a build. and you're going to have this idea of building it up, the invaders. So there's a truce almost happening here. So you can see this idea of, you know, usually the invaders are attacking, but in this case, we're bringing you in, we're having a chat, we're getting something done, and we'll let you build a little bit here, okay, but you're not attacking us. So there's this idea of trade here, and that's represented, of course, with the plant when we talked about this entwining element. So it was very easy for me to go and pick, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there around like healing blight and things like that, right? So there's a lot of that going on with plant. But I really like this idea of plant being the representation of the things coming together in this particular card here. And again, of course, you've got air for the mind, the thought, the thinking, they're coming together. And you've got, of course, the this is actually maybe in this case a good example of the empathy, what we mentioned before with water being empathy. This is here maybe water being an element of empathetic thought from the invaders towards the Dahan. So again, just amazing. Okay, last one up here, it's going to be animal here, and this is going to represent beasts, humans, blood, the body, life, and death. So as I talked about before, humanity is in here, but very much about the physical of humans, very much about the beasts on the animals on the island, and life and death as well, represented in there. I've got one more card here to talk about, which is Skies Herald the Season of Return. This is going to be 1 cost. It's a sun, moon, plant, and animal. Range 1, target any land. A spirit with presence on target board may add 1 of their destroyed presence. Gather up to 2 Dahan and push a blight. And again, fantastic element of storytelling happening in here. You can see in the artwork, it's got this really almost majestic, epic sort of feel. I do believe that's ThunderSpeaker again, because of the big sort of trident thing that she carries. And you've got, again, this idea, it's a little bit like Cycles of Tide and Time, in truth, where it's telling the story of the passage of time. So you've got the moon in here to give you that element of cycle and time. And what we're saying here is essentially a spirit with the presence on that board. So again, if the spirit is kind of in and around that island space, you have this returning of the presence. So the spirit is becoming more present. It's giving you that idea again of time. That's your passage of time, is that the spirit is returning. And of course, we're talking about the season of return. So this is the idea of returning, and it's gathering the Dahan. So the Dahan are coming back to the place where the spirit is returning. Very clearly here with ThunderSpeaker, of course, if ThunderSpeaker's coming back, the Dahan are all coming back there. And they're all really happy, of course, to see ThunderSpeaker back. And then this idea of pushing the blight away is kind of healing the land. So it's this coming together of all of these things over time. And again, this idea of Dahan traveling, blight healing, all of it is really giving you that feel of a long journey that's sort of almost coming to an end here, and marking the return of ThunderSpeaker. So again, clearly here you've got sort of all different elements of that. You've got the sun representing kind of the sky coming down with the cycle with the moon, and you've got this idea of regeneration from the plant, and then again you've got the kind of the life, almost life coming back from the dead, if you will, which is represented by the animal as well, and of course the hand by the animal too. So that took me way longer than I was initially intending. In truth, a lot of that just came flowing out, actually. I only added that little section with all of the cards at the last minute. I wasn't going to do that, and now I'm really glad that I did, because, as I say, before doing this episode, I did not have the appreciation that I have at this moment in time, which you've clearly just seen come flowing out of me for 42 minutes of what the elements represent in this game. I never really had it. I never really stopped and thought about what they do for this game as much as I have now. And I'm so happy to say that what I've seen, by going through the deck and picking those cards out and just talking through them to you right now, has given me a huge amount of appreciation and joy from the box that I never got to experience before, which is happening in real time, right in front of you. And I'm a little bit speechless, in all honesty. just amazing. I had a section here. This is kind of what I was going to say after all of that was done. So I'll just quickly skip through this last thing and then we'll get to the community stuff after. My general thoughts here were three. One, they're extremely well designed and developed. We just went through exactly why for the last 40 minutes. Two, they provide a signature identity that elevates the game to elite tier. This identity of Spirit Island, all of what we've just talked about, and of course it's represented all across the spirits. I've only just talked about minor powers here, but this is everywhere in the game, as you know. This identity of this game elevates this game, for me, beyond anything I've ever experienced in any game. Tying that level of thematic to mechanic is something extremely difficult, and every game tries to do it in some way or another. I have never seen it done even close to as well as it's done in this game. So from an accuracy standpoint, from this point one in terms of how well they're designed and developed, but also from the feeling and the lore and all the rest of it that you get from that kind of second point around the signature identity of this game, just elite. There's a reason why this game is ranked as like 10th or something on Board Game Geek. It should be higher. For me, it's first. I've never seen a game, and I think Brass Birmingham, I think I talked about Brass Birmingham before. Brass Birmingham is number one list on the list, if I'm not mistaken. A fantastic game. From a development point of view, Brass Birmingham is astonishing. How they've managed to balance that game the way they have, for me, is beyond belief. But you know, it of course brings its own level of thematic, right? And it's got plenty of little sort of signals and feelings all around the game of what you're doing, and you're doing this with an iron mine, and you're doing this with a beer barrel, and you're creating a brewery and whatever else you're doing in there, pottery barns and all this sort of stuff. But it just doesn't really come alive in the same way. It's balanced extremely well, but there's no way that game comes alive, even a quarter of the amount that it does in this game. So to have both of this, as I say, just absolutely astounding. Point three, and this is where I'm changing a little bit my mind, is I had written down, I can't quite connect with them from a personality and an identity point of view. Before now, I never had a connection with the elements in the game quite the same way that a lot of people that we're about to hear from the community have. And a big part of the reason was, well, number one, I never did what I just did, which is to stop and really go through and look, right? There's another reason, and that reason hasn't gone away. I was going to talk about it later, but I don't want to forget, because this is important. The reason why I didn't have the same level of connection with the spirits and the elements that I did, the same way that I did in Magic, right? Again, I'm referencing Magic here. When I played Magic, I was very much a blue player. Right, I mentioned blue already, and it's about the mind, and it's very much about stopping the other person. It's countering what they do. They do something, you just play a card that counters it. No, stop that. No, stop that. You're very much about stopping them. You don't really do anything. You kind of just sit there and stop everything they do, and you sort of just eventually win without really doing anything at all. I loved that. A control style of play. Obviously, we've got control in this game. You've got control spirits. Think about Finder, for example. Finder just doesn't do almost anything. It does everything and almost nothing at the same time. It moves everything everywhere. It just does anything it wants. It's massively in control of the invaders, but it almost doesn't do anything. It doesn't really progress its game for a lot of the game. Of course it does later, right? But kind of the identity, the key defining identity of Finder is I move everything around and I sort of just eventually maybe win, right? And that for me in Magic was the color blue, and I was very much steeped in that color. Like I always played that. That was my identity. I felt that identity in that game. In this game, I never really felt that identity in the same way. Now, I love Finder. Finder's like maybe my second favourite spirit in the game, or third favourite maybe. I adore Finder. I love that gameplay style. So it's no surprise to me that I love Blue and Magic, and I loved Finder when I came over here. But I didn't love Finder because of its elements. This is the key point I want to make here. I never identified with air on Finder, or moon, which are kind of the two key elements that are on Finder. They've got some others as well, right? There was never, for me, it was never like I was drawn to air. I like a lot of air spirits, don't get me wrong, right? And, you know, it might well be, it probably is my favorite element. In hindsight, on reflection, when I stop and think about it, yes, it probably is. But I never had that same level of pull to air that I did to blue in Magic. And this is just the last point. I'm not going to labor it. I'm going to close it out here because I just wanted to make that point. There's a difficulty. I'm not going to call it a problem because I don't see a problem here, but there's a difficulty in how they've implemented the elements in this game, because they're everywhere, and because you've got decks full of these elements, and every single card has its own identity, and it's very carefully tuned from a elemental standpoint to match the story, etc., that we've all just seen. But because you've got that everywhere, you've got it on the minors, you've got it on the majors, you've got it on the spirits, you've got it on the major thresholds. It's just everywhere. It's on the events. It's everywhere in the game. And because it's everywhere, and because there are so many elements involved in these things, for me, it always got a bit lost. That's the one issue that I want to just mention here, and the one problem I've had coming into here. And I don't like using the word problem because there isn't really something to solve here. It just is what it is. That's the way it's built, and it's perfect. I'm going to use the word perfect because it is literally perfect. But because it's everywhere, and because it's so prevalent, and it's just so steeped in everything, it's a little bit less for me. Each individual element gets less of a chance to shine. There are a handful of cards. Focus the Land's Anguish is one example that comes to my mind. That's just sun, right? It's sun. There's sun's rays, and you know, you gather all the blight in. It's like all of the intensity of damage and destruction and you know, blight on the land. It's like everything into one spot, and you just blast it with like a beam of solar energy or whatever, right? So you see, you've got the element of sun directly focused into that one particular card and that one particular flavor in that story moment. You don't have a lot of that in the game, where sort of something gets its own chance to stand alone, because most of the cards and the spirits and everything else in the game are very spread. You get less of the shine on one particular thing. Now, of course, there's downpour, right? And you've got relentless gaze. They do occur in the game. I'm not saying they don't, but because there's not as much of it, and there's more of a focus on multi-elements, which is only natural, like I said, because of the way they bring the cards together, you have to do that. And from a mechanical standpoint, from a game standpoint, you couldn't, you know, take half the cards in the deck and make them like single element. The game would just fall apart, right? It wouldn't work anymore. So that's why I'm saying this isn't a problem to solve. The way the game is made, it's like that, and it's perfect. But for me, it just ends up in a situation where each individual element for me just doesn't quite get its moment to stand alone and shine. That's all I'm going to say on that. I need to open a beer because I'm parched. This beer's been sitting here beside me, and I have been absolutely gushing about how amazing the elements are in this game. And my beer has sat beside me, going a little bit, what do you call it? A little bit warm, or room temperature. Got a little bit of thing here. My beer's slightly spilled, so this is one of them wish you could cut it out moments from the thing. If I was an audio only podcast, I would happily go back and make a cut there. But we're not an audio only podcast, we're a video podcast, and that is what we get. Beer was actually over full. That's why it spilled. The thing was right up to the very, very lip, which is a few extra mils of beer for me, and I certainly can't complain about a few extra mils of beer. So let's have a little look. What have we got here? Outer Place Brewing, Irish brewery, American brown ale. Oh yeah, quite nice. Very, very malty. soft caramel and chocolate from the malt. So yeah, very nice. An afternoon beer, so to speak. Maybe more of a an evening by the fire type of beer. I don't like fires. I hate heat. I'm sweating right now. I don't don't like being too warm. As I say, I'm sweating in this room. I've got lights shining on me. I'm getting animated. I'm getting active, but I'm enjoying myself. So let's keep going. Now, community interaction. We have loads of community interaction, and there's an analysis later on in the thing as well. So I'm going to try to get through this without stopping and talking through each of these things as well. But there's fantastic inputs here. So much of the types of things I've just done, where I've gone crazy about how much I love this, was being done with all the inputs here. So huge thank you to everybody who got involved. As always, I did take my how do we feel series or that kind of thing to the Discord this week. Discord is not the place for this. I had already sort of thought in my mind that trying to bring this to Discord was going to be difficult. God damn it, I cannot keep up with that bloody platform. So any of our Discord listeners who are listening in, yeah, there's lots of good conversation happening on there, but it's too all over the place. There's no threads really of conversation, so everything is just bam 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 bam, and then people are changing the conversation topics mid-thread. It's impossible to follow, and it's way too fast paced. You look away for half an hour and there's like 200 new messages, so it's very difficult for me to bring this conversation there in the same way that it is on the likes of Reddit, where everything is very much consolidated. You've got threads of each conversation, and it's not kind of conversational snappy one sentence type things. People are really thinking about their input. So Reddit still remains for me the kind of best place to put this, and again, we still see a huge amount of great response. So thank you to everybody, including the Discord and the Reddit users. I have one comment which was sort of consolidating a bunch of inputs from one particular user from Discord, which were really, really good. That's going to close out the whole section, but we're gonna start off right up front here, and we've got Physics and Physique. Says, the elements make up one of the most intriguing parts of Spirit Island. Your spirit has these elements that encapsulate their nature. So you look for powers that use those elements, and that helps you grow in power, which is, i.e., build out your innates. This to me is the first level of flavor that the elements enhance gameplay. Then each element is associated with its own unique set of effects. So when you draft powers to get your elements, you often get effects that fit your theme, which I really like. That's the second level of flavor. So you're looking for the element, but naturally the elements are more linked to certain effects that are linked to your identity. So you sort of almost get this inherent kind of power matching, which comes from the elements, which is great. And then we have the major powers, which get stronger if you have their elements. And I love that majors become so much better if you reach the threshold, because if it's a major that's on theme for you, it'll be the best pick most of the time. So that's another big flavor win there. They're kind of third level of flavor. And this, Ryan talks about in the KSP all the time about the Spirit's ultimate power. And clearly here the game is full of this, where you've got kind of cards like Volcanic Eruption for Volcano, or Pyroclastic Flow also for Volcano. You've got Talons of Lightning for Lightning, even though they can never afford to cast that card, but the game is full of them. Obviously massively big flavor win if you can get them to come together. Finally, Physics and Physique says, as for my favourite elements, it's without contest Moon. Moon stands for change, darkness and power, and a lot of the spirits that use Moon feel very unique. So things like Gift of Power and Call of the Hand Ways, which is very much about transformation, come to mind. And my favourite spirit is Fractured Days, which very much encapsulates the essence of Moon. So we've got a lot of conversations in here around what people like and why they like it. And I've just kept as much of this in as I could, because I really wanted to let people kind of get the feel for it. Noy the Devil says, I like aubergine. Full stop. Actually, I don't even think they had a full stop. I like aubergine. I think they're referencing the air element here. If I look at this, does this look like an aubergine? It does look a bit like an aubergine. And also, unless I'm mistaken, the air element changed. Am I right in saying that? It's a feather, but I think it might have changed over time. I could be wrong. there might have been like an initial printing or something that had the air element look slightly different. I think, I'm sure that the broken token crate changed. So again, I've got the crate over my shoulder here. The top looked a certain way. There's two variants of essentially. So for the first release, it looked like X, and then after a certain time, they changed it to Y. So, and I think the air element was different in both of those things. So I'm not actually sure. Anybody wants to hit me up in the comments about what happened with the air element over time? I'd love to hear you. Up next then we've got Greedo 102, Moon Air Beast for Life. Source, I love Breath of Darkness. Oh yeah, Moon Air Beast are a nice combo. I love Breath of Darkness myself. You've also got Bring Your Dreams and Nightmares, falls directly into that camp as well. So big fan of that particular combo. Next up then you've got at Captain Obvious. Ever since I first started playing, Ocean has been my favourite spirit, and he is still my most played spirit. So as a consequence, no matter which spirit I play, every time I see a card with water, I get neuron activation and my brain goes, water card. And cards with water earth gain triple this effect, of course. So yeah, absolutely understand the concept behind that one. I'm sure people with downpour mains will be very much of the same kind of thought with the water elements. So up next then we've got Flimsy Preparation 85 says, I think Animal has some of my favourite threshold majors, especially the beast cards like Sea Monsters and Tigers Hunting, and there's a whole bunch of other ones that are in there as well. And actually Beta Jin then, who always has lots of really great things to say in the comments, came in under this. So I usually don't put responses, but this one was really good. So Beta Jin came in and said, also worth noting that Animal is the sole highest element threshold on 10 different majors. The most for any element. So getting an extra animal element puts a lot of thresholds within reach. Really important comment for my journey throughout all of the prep for this particular episode. This comment changed how I was planning on doing this episode completely. Let me read it again. Also worth noting that Animal is the sole highest element threshold on 10 different majors. The most for any element. What do they mean by that? So if you think about a major power threshold, they've got a number of elements on there, right? It might be like 2 of one, 2 of one, 3 of the other. So any card where Animal is the highest number, and by the way, this Betagen clarified here after the fact, he means not tied, right? So not tied on its own, stands alone as the single highest element. There's 10 majors where Animal is the single highest element on those cards, and that's the most of any of the major powers. When I read that, I was like, oh, okay, that's insightful. That's really important, because what I really wanted to do with this episode was come up with a way to first tell the story, which is what we're doing now. We're telling the story of elements. We're really bringing the elements to life that way. But the other sort of theme I wanted to explore in this episode was which are actually the best elements, right? So not just which are the ones that we enjoy the most for whatever reason, but which are the best elements, what are the strongest elements in the game. And I wanted to try find a way to do that, and I wasn't fully sure, and this gave me a little bit of a eureka moment where I'm like, okay, I can go through and I can analyze all the majors and see which are the most important elements for majors. And then I started to kind of pick at little threads, and as I said, we'll do the data analysis later, but this was the comment that got me there. So clearly here they're saying that picking up picking up an animal element en route in your games will give you slightly better chances, or at least it'll threshold slightly more majors. It's slightly more important for thresholding the average major in the deck. So that was a really, really important note there, and we'll come back, of course, to that later on. Now, Mammoth C9501, Elemental Boon is probably my favourite card in the game. And they're referring here, of course, to when I made the post in the subreddit. The image that I attached in the thing was I was just stopping and checking and making sure that my light was plugged in. I almost panicked for a second that I hadn't replugged my light when I moved all the stuff around, but it is plugged in. the post that I made included the card Elemental Boon. Clearly here, Elemental Boon is the card that most strongly signals towards elements, of course, within the minor power deck and the game, really. And they're obviously picking up on that as being their favourite card in the game. I think I'll stop now, because I've remembered about this little mini section that I forgot to include around the cards in the game that are not elementally aligned. There's very few. You've got Elemental Boon, which is, I mean, from an element perspective, it's amazing, right? It's perfect. It's nothing but elements. So this is this idea of a boon. You're linking a spirit to a spirit, and you're linking them via elements. You have to take the same elements each, right? Now, in practice, when you play this card, often you'll do, I'll take 2 and maybe you'll take 1 or 2, and there'll be a slight overlap, and, you know, the game plays and it goes on. But obviously from a thematic standpoint here, you're trying to link the two spirits together and using the sort of elemental energies that both have, finding a way to tie the two together and fuse them, which is fantastic. So again, storytelling, it's brilliant. The other one then in the minor power deck is the kind of later variant of that. I think in Jagged Earth they brought out Gift of Nature's Connection. I've already mentioned it's my single favorite minor in the game. I think it's top 3 most powerful minors in the game. I think it may be only second to Gift of Constancy. It's a fantastic card. It's a wonderful card. It's just amazing. And it's another variant of Elemental Boon a little bit. You can give target spirit 2 of a single element or 2 energy. If you target another spirit, you also get a single element of your choice. So again, you've got this idea of passing each other elements. You can also use it for energy, which is why this card is so strong, because it's just so highly flexible. You can give yourself energy, you can give them energy, you can give each other elements. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with this card. So it's absolutely amazing. And again, Nature's Connection, Gift of Nature's Connection. So one is like a boon. It's like tying yourself with the elements. The other one is tying yourself within the nature. So the Nature's Connection is kind of all encompassing, and it kind of covers everything in there. So really, really, really good. The other card, which is devoid of elements, which is in the major power deck, I think there's only 3, which are essentially no elements written on the card. I could be wrong. Hope I'm forgetting any. Draw Towards a Consuming Void is the opposite of everything we've been talking about. It's no elements. It's no anything. It's a black hole. Even light won't escape a black hole. It doesn't give you any elements. It wants to be in play on its own. Because of course it's got the threshold with the power comes from repeating the card, where you can only repeat it if it's the only power card you have in play. So thematically, it's forcing you to just play the black hole. It's forcing you to abandon all the other elements that you have. It's sucking everything in from around it and destroying it. Playing the card. Thresholding the card forces you to sacrifice your cards in your hand. It makes you forget your cards. It even pulls cards into the black hole. It pulls everything in there, and it's amazing. It is just an amazing card. I love Draw Towards a Consuming Void. You saw what I did with it with Bringer in a very recent playthrough when I got to do the whole Bringer combo, which it's a brilliant card, of course, on Bringer for kind of fear combo purposes, but from a thematic standpoint, it is just magnificent. Pulling everything, pulling the cards, forcing you to forget cards to thing, and just the whole thing is just amazing. And yes, it's devoid of elements, so it's kind of the not relationship with the rest of this episode, but of course it deserved a mention, and I'm really glad I remembered it. I should have had that as its own section, but we've kind of randomly dropped Mammoth C. Your comment triggered the whole thing, so thank you for that, Mammoth C. And continuing on then from that, we've got Boudreaux. I've nearly gone to Bordeaux there, haven't I? I almost went to Bordeaux. I have this terrible habit I'm going to wine. I'm just going straight to alcohol at this point. I'm skipping the cheese. It was Emmental with the cheese last time, but I've just gone straight to Bordeaux and red wine at this stage. So maybe that's a consequence of drinking a beer in the middle of the afternoon. But who's to say? So we've got Boudreaux. I think this card has one of my highest pick rates and win rates for minors. I love that the app tracks that. So again, they're talking about Elemental Boon here. And they're mentioning that the app tracks their win rates, which we'll get to a little bit later on because somebody else mentions this. So they love the Elemental Boon and say it's very strong. TDA comes in and continues the conversation and says, I cannot persuade my game group to not call this card Elemental Boobs. Oh God, TDA, I thought about leaving this out, but it got so many upvotes that I had to leave it in. If you can give me boobs, I can do something really amazing right now. Did you reclaim your boobs yet? You're never too old to laugh at terrible jokes like this. Apologies to anyone I've offended, of course. And sun is the best element. So blame TDA if that's the case. They say, and sun is the best element. Dahan go burr. Yeah, so of course they're referencing sun and its kind of command of the Dahan there. Moving on swiftly from that particular mess, which I definitely should have left out. We've got Symphony 7. Something I really appreciate about Spirit Island is the way you are forced to adapt and plan on the fly. And a big part of that is the way you don't always know how you will grow over the course of a game. Spirit Island does a good job of leaving little breadcrumbs in the spirit design that might encourage you to grow in a particular direction when you see how the game is playing out. They do this with both the elements and with the actual card effects. So these little breadcrumbs is what Symphony is getting at here. So for an example, let's look at my favourite spirit, Sharp Fangs. Terrifying Chase has 2 little hooks that might pull you as you grow. It has excellent hand movement, but you don't have any defend in your kit. This might lead you to pick up some defense and turn into a defensive spirit, or it might turn you supportive and move all of your hand to another player, such as BlunderSpeaker or something, who can use them better than you. Terrifying Chase also has a random sun element on it. What's that doing there? You don't do anything with sun, right? And this is just a little cool little dangling hook that makes you a little bit more likely to pick up the other sun cards to maybe meet thresholds, maybe pick up a major with a sun threshold on that type of thing. So obviously sun mages are going to be completely different from your native kind of animal plant stuff, and this can lead you to completely transform yourself by the end of the game, which is so cool. Absolutely. This game is, like we said, it's brilliant for that. Clearly here in this particular case, Terrifying Chase, it's got a sun element on it for a reason. It's got a storytelling element of sun because, of course, you're pushing the hand, so that's kind of where that comes from in that particular case. But, of course, then, as Symphony is saying here, that mechanically leads you down a path to go and potentially link in more with the element of sun in your gameplay, which in turn has this kind of cyclical effect, which leads back to a feeling of adapting your spirit and turning into something else, which is just brilliant. And they say, as far as the strongest element, I think it has to be sun, hands down. One look through the major deck at the best ones and you'll find the majority of them have sun in them, which is something we will most certainly be coming back to later on. Now, Inconsequentialis says, it's sun for me. Starlight is kind of the pick your element spirit, and I both really like the sun innate as well as the sun cards you tend to play with that innate. Bang on the money. Starlight, sun, 2 go together like like wine and cheese. That's the first thing that came into my head. Oh dear. To be fair, peanut butter and jelly is also food, but wine and cheese was just the first thing that came in my head. So that one wasn't planned, but the Bordeaux is really sticking with me here from the previous comment. So yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about Starlight a little bit later on in the episode, of course. We have then Amputatos. I like that. That's a pretty funny name. Amputatos. Moon is the coolest, but Plant is the most utile. Okay, Plant being the most utile is interesting. I can't say off the bat whether I agree or disagree with that. You know what? I think I'm going to disagree with that in truth. I didn't think about this in advance, but as I say, Plant for me is a little bit like kind of growth, regrowth. Blight healing, I almost can't think of anything else plant does. Like, yes, we talked about the storytelling on call to trade. You've got another major in the deck there, which is entwined power, so it gives you that entwining kind of feeling from that as well. But I can't really think of plant being, especially utile. Like, what does plant do, you know? And we will, of course, in our data breakdown, look what plant actually does do. Can't off the top of my head remember exactly where it's at its strongest, but I don't believe it's at its most utile. I feel there are other elements that are a little bit more. Now, when they say utile here, maybe they mean literally utility from a utility perspective in the game with an uppercase U, and the kind of the one of the 5 kind of categories that the spirit can fall into, or maybe they just mean utility, you know, across a whole range of functions here. So it could be either or, but in both cases, well, in the case of across everything, I don't agree. In the case of utility itself, I can't remember, in all honesty. And again, we'll get to a little bit later on how kind of support and utility works and how close it is aligned to plant. Now, next up then, Gooseman is a gamer. Good old Goosey back. I feel like I've played enough Darkness and Bringer at this point that I have a Pavlovian response anytime I see 2 out of Moon, Air and Beast show up on a card. Pavlovian response. You just know when I read Pavlovian response for the first time, you know where my mind went. Of course, I went straight to Pavlova. I went straight to the dessert when I read this. I have no clue. I went and read it after the fact, and Pavlovian response means it's like a conditioned response. There's some, obviously, you know, science, and I don't know whether it's a particular person called Pavlova, or whether you know, there's a region or something, or what it is exactly, why it's called Pavlovian. But there was kind of studies done around kind of conditioning. I think dogs were part of the thing, and they conditioned dogs to have a certain response over time to certain stimulus, that kind of thing. But I don't believe Pavlova as the dessert was involved, but I could be wrong. But of course, my mind went there. I haven't studied the cards and elements like others have, so I don't really have a good handle on what the theme of many of the elements are effects-wise. But I feel like the Moon-Air combo is a big fear generator, and animal usually means this card is going to be fun to play. Yeah, why not? That's a good reason as any. And overall, I probably pay too much attention to which elements cards I have, because I love hitting innates, and I tend to pick elements over card function far more often than I should. So from that point, I feel like I probably overvalue elements. So that's an interesting point. And 1 or 2 other people picked up on this in slightly different variants. So something to keep an eye out on as we go here. I like Moon is Papa Nurgle 84. All of my favorite spirits are mainly Moon, so manipulation and subversion, that's my style. And Papa Nurgle, I sincerely hope you're talking about your style in the game as opposed to style in real life, because that's not particularly nice. They're not particularly nice personality traits, I have to admit, but to each their own. Up next then we have Nora Adrenaline coming in here with some really nice inputs. The observation that comes to my mind is that there are pairs of elements that are opposites, and when a spirit makes use of opposing pairs, it's a shorthand for quote-unquote otherworldliness, or being a little bit removed from the natural order of things. So this is really nice input here. So, for example, light opposes dark, so we saw sun and moon, and fractured days and wandering voice, and to some extent finder, are spirits that are super weird, either thematically or mechanically, or both. Then they say earth opposes air, and shifting memory exhibits very abnormal behavior for a spirit, which they do because they're super crazy and they cut parts of themselves away over time so that they forget everything they've learned so that they can relearn it again because they're bored, and that's interesting. So that's certainly very abnormal. Then there's not a strongly fire water spirit, but Wounded Water's right innate utilizes both, representing the spirit's unnatural corruption. Vengeance 2, And sure, lightning has a bit of water in their innate, but I think in that case, all it means is that a lot of time is that a lot of time when there's lightning, it's raining, which is fair enough. And of course, arguably the most otherworldly spirit of all, Starlight's innates are mostly grouped in opposing elemental pairings, which I'd never thought about before. So really interesting insight for my favorite spirit there. And they say, I'd say that plant and animal are not as inherently opposed as the other elemental opposite pairs, just by nature of what they represent. And so Fangs isn't defined as much of a weirdo, which is obviously, you know, super accurate here. And they say, I think it's neat that the creators can use elements to compose thematic harmony or discord in the nature of a spirit. And speaking of the creators, we had a response from Nora, one Eric Royce. Nice observation. Long ago, I did a sort of spatial drawing of near and opposed elements, and instead of being a circle, it was more like an infinity symbol, with plant and animal spatially close to each other in the center, despite being far apart as you traced a line from element to element. Now, I didn't quite understand what he meant from tracing a line from element to element at the end, because for me, the elements go in a straight line. And obviously, plant and animal are connected at the end of the list. So even if you did that in a circle or a straight line, they'd always be beside each other. So I don't know what he means there about them being far apart as you trace a line from element to element. That was the bit I didn't quite understand in his response. And if I think what I thought about when I saw that was in Magic the Gathering, the elements are listed kind of in a circle, and you do have this idea of opposing elements being opposite each other in the circle, and kind of the thematics that come with that. So that was what triggered in my mind, but I couldn't really quite piece this together. So Eric, if you're listening, I'd love to hear from you, or in the comments, inviting the creator of the game to respond to my YouTube video. But I'd love to know what he means by that last bit there. But obviously here what he's saying is reinforcing the point from Nora, which is that plant and animal are, despite being far apart, they're actually spatially very close to each other. So really enjoyed that little breakdown there from Nora. Gooseman as a gamer comes back in here then. So Goose went off. Goose came in, gave his input around Bringer and Breath of Darkness, and then disappeared for 2 hours, and then came back into the comments with a doozy here. So Goose comes back and says, okay, we've listed our own personal element preferences, but what about the community at large? So Goose is doing a big part of a breakdown for me here, but looking at the community. So this is really interesting. So what elements are on the cards they are most likely to pick? What about the cards they are least likely to pick? And he links mindwanderer.net/SI, which is a website I wasn't familiar with because I don't play the digital app, but this is a fantastic site, and I've checked it. It is fantastic. That gathers data about games played in the app. So if we look at the minor power deck, on average, a card should be chosen 1/4 of the time it appears, which makes sense. When you do a draft, you get 4 drafts. If the card is chosen on average, it should be picked 1 out of 4 times, essentially. Which makes sense. So there are 20 cards that are chosen more than 1/3 of the time that they appear. So clearly here, that's quite far above the average. These are the cards the community objectively considers the best. And then he says, by what criteria? Who knows? And one of these emojis. So here is the elemental breakdown of those 20 cards. And these are the number of times the element appears on a card. Sun 4, Moon 7, Fire 6, Air 6, Water 4, Earth 8, Plant 7, Animal 6. So what does this tell us? Mostly, people don't really dig cards with Sun or Water. At least they don't really dig those elements. So Sun and Water are the ones that appear as 4. The rest are kind of 6, 7, 8. Okay. The other elements are clustered near the top, with Earth at the highest. So we can see a bit more if we look a bit deeper. Earth is on 5 of the top 6 cards that get chosen in that app. Now do bear in mind here, the app itself is not inclusive of all of the cards in the game, unless I'm very much mistaken. You do not have Nature Incarnate included in the app. So I think the app only includes up to Jagged Earth. And even it doesn't even include all the spirits, but I'm pretty certain it includes all the cards up to Jagged Earth, so not including nature cards. Not quite. Well, actually, I suppose the minor power deck was essentially complete before Nature Incarnate came out, wasn't it? So you actually only have one more minor power appear in the deck, where they replaced Growth Through Sacrifice with Roiling Bog. So that's fair enough. So we essentially do have the full minor power deck. But what Goose says here, so Earth is 5 of the top 6 cards. Animal is 5 of the top 7. Sun is none of the top 7. And Water is only 1 of the top 8. So what do the top 7 cards have in common? 6 out of 7 of the top cards have Defend. Okay, so really nice breakdown there. So we see Earth doing really well, Animal doing really well, generally speaking, and Sun and Water doing really, really poorly when it comes to the most drafted cards. Now, if we look at the least chosen cards then, 14 of them are chosen less than 1/8 of the time. So less than half as often as you'd expect. So here's the elemental breakdown. Sun 4, Moon 3, Fire 4, Air 6, Water 5, Earth 7, Plant 4, Animal 8. So what's weird is that there's a lot of commonality in the elements that appear on the most and the least frequently chosen cards. So Earth and Animal both show up a lot in both sets. Sun and Water, not as much. So very interesting there. So the top and the bottom are kind of very similar in terms of what's in and what's out. So finally they say Earth is on 5 of the bottom 6 cards, all chosen less than 1/10 of the time. Sun is on 4 of the bottom 6. Moon is on none of them. And then Fire, Air, Water and Plant are all on 1 of the bottom 6. Wow, really, really interesting actually. So there's very few elements actually showing up in that bottom 6. I'm wondering, yeah, okay, they're all pretty concentrated into Earth and Animal, I guess. 4 of the bottom 6 add blight and or damage to hand, which is very, very insightful. And the other 2 push, gather, invaders. So 4 of the bottom 6 add blight. So that's your drought, your what else do we have? We've got Scour the Land, we have Lands of Haunts and Embers, and we've got Dire Metamorphosis, I think are the 4 that add blight in the minor power deck. And I think they're all really good cards for the most part. Dire Metamorphosis maybe slightly less, but I think the other 3 I'm pretty high on. But then we all either love, finally Gooseman says, we all either love or hate Earth and Animal. We don't really get excited about Water and Sun much either way, I guess. And then another one of these emojis. And then he closes out and says, and Moon is simply awesome. Really, really, really nice breakdown there. Thank you so much, Goose. When I saw this, I clicked through and I started looking through the app and I started clicking and thinking, how can I potentially include this breakdown in my episode? But at that point I had already done so much of the data analysis and I was like, I'll just have to turn this now a bit on its head, and it's just too much more work. I had already done a lot and I was already feeling the episode was going quite long, which clearly it is. So I didn't dig any further. So that was kind of the end of that. I wanted to leave that in because that's a really great breakdown. Thanks, Goose. And they've clearly shown here that it's a bit of a mixed bag, right? Ultimately, they tried to get to a consensus, and you've got kind of Earth and Animal being the best, but then also being the worst. And then you've got Water and Sun, which kind of didn't show up at the top, but they kind of didn't show at the bottom either. So a little bit of a mixed bag there, and a little bit hard to pinpoint exactly which element are necessarily the best coming out of that. But as I say, I've got a data breakdown later, and I'm going to tell you exactly which one is the best. So do hold on to your seat for that one. We've got a couple more here, guys. I think we've got about sort of 4 or 5 more, give or take. We've got Whiskey Biscuit then 222 says, I'm basic, where I am focusing card choice in the innate abilities. I feel every player wants to be able to stack their impact every turn. So but element enablement is key for some spirits, whereas some spirits you don't have to pay too much attention to it, and that's the beauty of Spirit Island. So I do strongly agree with this, and I really like that they brought that in here, that not every spirit cares as much about just draft whatever elements I can find. Some spirits, it's almost all you care about because you just want to hit those innate, and they're so good that you'll play almost anything that contains those elements. Whereas other spirits, usually the ones with less card play, you have to really think about what cards you're going to play. Something like Shifting Memory of Ages, one of my favorite spirits. Very little card play. Bringer Dreams and Nightmares, another one I really enjoy, and another one with very little card play. You don't have the action economy, you don't have the card play to dedicate to any old card. And we actually saw this, I think, as a good example of the game with Bringer, where I played what is it called? The one that lets you replay cards. I can't remember what it's called. It's the one, the boon. It's one of the boons or gifts or whatever it's called. But the one that lets you. I'm gonna go and find it because I've done enough faffing here. I'll quickly find it in the deck. It'll take me 1 second. Gift. No, it's not that one. Where are you? Gift of Twin Days. Yeah, it took me a little longer than I was hoping. So Gift of Twin Days. On Bringer was awful. Now, that's a really strong card. But when I played it on Bringer, because I had so few card play, I had nothing to copy with Bringer. So I played the card. I actually took it not because of the element alignment necessarily, although it does have a moon. But I was in my head. I sort of had this sort of power recall. There's a term for it I can't quite remember here. Where you remember the card being good, so you associate the good thing with that, without thinking about the card in context. That was a card I was picked up and went, Twin Days is really good, it's great. We both get a copy, it's a really strong card. But then when I played it, I actually didn't have anything to copy with Bringer, so it was actually quite a poor card for Bringer. I would never pick that with Bringer again. It was a great example of where you really need to think about the context of a card. Now in this case, clearly we're talking about elements rather than effect, but it's just something to bear in mind where some spirits just don't have the need or desire for perfect element alignment, and they're thinking a little bit more about the effect of the card and really getting their bang for the buck there. So thank you for that, Whiskey Biscuit. Up next then we have Stardama69, and they say, I don't have one favourite spirit yet, probably a toss-up between Green Ocean, Starlight Darkness and ThunderSpeaker, but so far my favourite elements are plant and water. Water floods and destroys buildings, plants provides protection and rejuvenation, and together they're nothing but good stuff. So interesting here, I found that Stardama doesn't have a favourite spirit, but they do have favourite elements. So it's a little bit in conflict, or the opposite, should I say, of kind of my own thoughts around what I talked about right at the top of the episode, where I said that I have my favourite spirits, clearly, and I think Finder was one example where I very much love the spirit and what the spirit does, but I don't have such a close connection to the elements. Whereas Stardama here is quite the opposite. They're saying that they love the elements and they have their favourite elements, but not necessarily nailed down on their favourite spirits yet. So quite interesting little kind of reverse on that one there. Excuse me. So then we have Protocol Skull. Protocol Skull says, I chase innate matching elements on most spirits, especially if zero cost. So they're talking about the cost now as much as the elements. The higher levels of an innate are often worth effectively giving up a card play, for which is what you do if you play a relatively ineffective card just for its elements. If all else is equal, in an off-draft element, I'll prioritize water because Years of Little Rain exists. So there's the first mention of Years of Little Rain. I thought I'd hear more of this, to be honest. And I don't think anybody else mentioned drafting cards for the elements for the choice events. Now, we're going to pick up on the choice events later, so I'm not going to go into that right now, but this is a great example of when you're drafting and you don't necessarily have the perfect draft for you in a moment, thinking about your elements on your drafts and which choice events you might want to pay for is a real, it's a serious level up. That's advanced play. That's very much an advanced play type of mindset and strategy. That's very difficult to have when you're newer to the game. It's not really something that you pick up on until a lot of plays down the line. I'll be honest, a lot of the time I'm not even thinking about it when I'm drafting. I don't really draft for events as much as I should. I'll be honest, I'll say it right now. That's a level up I can have in my game. I need to think about this a little bit more. Now, I do think about it from time to time. For me though, I'm more thinking about I usually draft for effect a little bit more than for elements, but again, it depends on my spirit, so that clearly can make a difference here. Cost is a big one as well. Lower cost versus higher cost when you're drafting a 0 versus a 1 is a big deal. But rarely am I thinking about, okay, well, all else being equal, what's the best element for the events? And not just what's the best event. So in this case, clearly here, Years of Little Rain is the best event that you want to pay for. We'll talk about it later and we'll look at it. So clearly here, having a water for Years of Little Rain will be amazing if you come across it. But the extra level, even above that, if you can get to the point where you are choosing which element you want to draft based on the worst event for your game right now, if you have those events memorized and you're thinking, oh God, that particular event would wreck me right now, I'm going to draft for that event. And that might not be Years of Little Rain, that might be one of the others. But if you can draft for a particular event, given the context of your game, that's a real serious level up. And that's the type of play in truth that I see when I watch people like Red Revenge play the game. I use him as an example all the time because he obviously creates more content than anybody else in the game, and I talk about watching him and how quickly he makes decisions and watching the things he's thinking about through the game and how he does it so fast. They're the type of things he talks about. Playing around events isn't just I'll play around the hand, defend, or I'll play around beast damage. Some of those are quite kind of straightforward, and I would like to say I'm pretty good at that kind of gameplay. But playing around events like choice events is a level that I haven't gotten to yet, and I aspire to. But anyway, that's a little bit of a sidebar there, but a nice one from Protocol School, and thanks for mentioning. Okay, up next we've got Oma Bonk. When I was new to the game, I drafted only for effect and not for elements. And at the end of my games, I'd always noticed my cards had a lot of plant and sun in them. So I think a lot of defend cards or fast problem solvers, for example, Enticing Splendor or Call to Isolation, which have plant or sun, are very appealing to new players. So something to keep in mind when bringing new players into the game, maybe. I could be wrong. So really like this input here from Alma. So they're actually quite the opposite of the previous comment. So previous comment was mentioning about drafting for element, and then Alma here was saying that, especially when they were new to the game, that they drafted mostly for effect and not for elements, which is, I would say, not very much a new player approach. I would say new players are probably far more linked to the elements. So drafting for effect is actually quite a leveled up, slightly more advanced way to approach drafting. So if you started there, Alma, that's a pretty you must be a pretty good player. But they're saying that they'd noticed they'd have a lot of plant and sun on the cards. So I didn't check this, in all honesty, but I love this input, and it's something to keep in mind if you're listening to the episode now and you're a little bit struggling on where to draft and where to go. They gave two examples. Enticing Splendor and Call to Isolation are fast problem solvers. They're your tempo type cards. Enticing Splendor for me is the epitome of a tempo card. It's a good one. It's fast. It solves problems in the fast. It's a little bit conditional there, but again, sun on Enticing Splendor and Call to Isolation. Pretty sure both have sun on them. So thanks for that. Next up then we have the Household of Nelson says, Sun and Animal are the clear winners for now. Not only do I count cards like Vigor of the Breaking Dawn and Wrap in Wings of Sunlight among my favourites, but they are extremely powerful since the Han are easily the most energy efficient source of damage available to the players. Two very strong sun mages being mentioned there. So absolutely no surprise that the Household of Nelson prioritizes the sun and animal elements there. Up next then we have Swarmlord, and we really are getting to the end here, folks. I think we've only about two, maybe three left here. So Swarmlord 5 says, definitely a great part of what makes Spirit Island unique. They add so much to a spirit's identity. So for example, in Rampant Green, which is my favorite, the main elements are Moon, which represents change, and Plant, which represents growth. And just with that and the mechanics, you get a good idea of what the spirit is. So they're not even talking about gameplay at this point. They're just talking about the identity. Almost by looking at the thing and looking at the colors and the elements, you get a feel for what the spirit's supposed to be doing. They also say my favorite element is water, which happens to be the third element on the spread of Rampant Green. And there's so many things that water can do: rain, giant waves, disease, regenerating the land. It can do almost anything. Mild Resolve then, this was the last of the Reddit comments, and they say, I mean, it's probably a boring answer, but it just depends on what spirit I'm playing and what my innates are. So that said, I'm generally more defensive and protective than aggressive or reckless, so I definitely tend to pick more water than beasts when playing Wounded Waters. So I really like this input here where you have a spirit that's got this kind of dual identity and you kind of get to choose, so they're very much more inclined to go towards the defensive and protective side, which is the water side of Wounded Waters. And they also say when the shifting memory aspect to horde elements to modify powers, which is the intensify aspect for memory. I love being able to make a slow miner fast with wind. So shifting memory clearly here a great example of using elements within a game. Again, one of my favorite spirits in the game. Intensify gives you a way to use elements in a whole other way. And very, very strong and fun aspect, of course. So finally here, the last one, as I mentioned, I'm going to close out with EOS here, and EOS is coming in from Discord this time, so I had to piece together a whole bunch of little sentences here to get the inputs that they had, but there's some really, really nice stuff here and very personal. So this was something that I wanted to close with here, which was very personal to them, and I really wanted to highlight it and give it the time to kind of breathe, because I really, really did enjoy this. So first of all, they say, I love how fire comes with a sense of unruliness, chaos, and raw potential. I'm an abstract girl, or gender neutral. I'm abstract girly, gender neutral, and animal makes use of that space the least. So it's almost always used in a literal sense, so I'm pretty meh about that. So they start to talk about the gender here. And they say, Moon is another favourite of mine conceptually because of trans rights. It has a sort of gentle influence that speaks to me. So things like subtlety, secrecy, cooperation, discovery, transformation. And yeah, Starlight is the premier moon spirit, and its colour palette is sampled from the trans flag, which are whites, blues, and pinks. Absolutely, what Starlight is kind of sampled from there. So again, really, really, really personal for them, and they put a whole bunch of stuff around all the different elements, and I was really, really thankful for this. But it showed how much that the elements in a game meant to them, which is in quite stark contrast for me, where, as I said, I didn't really have that. But here, this opened my eyes quite a bit, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked hearing what they had to say. They also said Moon's connection to dreams is also what really got me into the conceptual side of elements. And they finally closed out a couple more. Water has some great conceptual uses too. Flexibility, empathy, motion, but a bit one note. And then finally, they say, I haven't spoken much about sun, but I think it's a solid element. I think it being the element of cooperation in general means it gets over applied, and it definitely has some interesting angles, but its wide base muddies it a bit. So massive thank you to you, EOS, and for sharing your more personal side of all of those things and what they mean to you. So I couldn't think of a better way to close that one out and put a kind of a bow on top of all of that from everybody. There were a handful of other names here. Dr. Coconut 477, Two Short Planks, According to All KN, Orion 1142, Tesla Coil, and Fifth Guy 85 all provided extra inputs around their favorites, what the mechanics are, the thematics, flavor, all that kind of stuff. So I couldn't fit everything in. So massive thank you to everybody in all that you provided there. I loved hearing about all of that, and as I say, it actually meant something to me, because hearing what everybody said and how they interacted with the elements and what it meant to them was a really key conduit for, oh God, why did I use that word? That's so businessy. That was awful, but it was a really key, it was a trigger for me. It really did. It kind of gave me the link that I needed to go back and re-look at what these elements are in this game. So huge thank you on a personal level, not just for the show and the channel, but actually for me, to all of you for giving what you did there. So thank you again. I'm gonna stop here for a moment to drink some water, because I'm getting a bit, you can probably hear, a little bit dry, a little bit dehydrated. Pour myself a bit more water, and I'm going to listen, because My wife has gone to collect the kids. I was thinking about stopping, but I didn't really want to stop because I don't like to stop. As we say, we do this in one take, always. Or almost always. So I just have to listen and make sure that my son isn't crying because he is in just the other room over there. So I'm going to be quiet for just a moment and listen to my sparkles from my water and whether or not my son is screaming. Those sparkles are so loud. I wonder if the camera or if the mic can pick that up. I highly doubt it, but my son is not screaming, thankfully, which is good news. So we have that's the community stuff, right? So that's done. The next thing that I wanted to do then after that, as I say, is get into my own analysis of this. Now, I've really gone through a lot of detail up until now. We're now an hour and 42 into the episode, so I need to be careful about how long I go on all of this. I have a breakdown of the minor thresholds. So there are thresholds on 16 minor powers, 2 for each color, 2 for each element within the game. So I wanted to have a little bit of a look at those because they sort of are a little bit unique. Obviously, all the majors all have thresholds, so I'm not going to do an analysis of them. I was just going to look at the little minor breakdown for now. I also have a breakdown then of the choice events, which I mentioned, so we're going to have a little look at those ones as well. And then I'm going to get into the breakdown of the data and kind of which the best element are. So that's going to be the whole kind of next section here. We're going to start off then with the, as I say, the minor thresholds here. And I'm not going to spend all day looking at these because we'll be here for too long. We're going to start out then with Sun. Right, so Sun has 2 cards here. I'll bring them up on screen. It's Drought and it's Favor of the Sun and Starlit Dark. 2 strong cards right off the bat. Good start. I mentioned already the Blight ad cards earlier on in the episode. I really like Drought. I think Drought is an excellent card. I think it's going to be really underdrafted in the game because I believe probably a lot of people with maybe lesser experience or maybe playing at lower difficulties will be highly unlikely to draft a card that adds Blight. I think it's probably kind of quite a well-known thing, and the KSP and everything talked about this quite a lot over their show, is that newer players tend to avoid Blight. You don't want to add it, right? You're not kind of aware. You know Blight is a lost condition, so you're less likely to kind of add it to the island. And this is a card that adds Blight. It's also a card that destroys 3 towns and a city. If you can threshold the thing, which is 3 Sun, it's a major power. I said this recently on the Discord. So Drought is a major power. This card is nuts. I think this is amazing. I think this is not only not a bad card. I think this is up there in terms of maybe like an A tier card for me. I think it's extremely strong. It's at most flirting with A tier, or sorry, it's at least flirting with A tier. I think it's a super strong card. I also think Favor the Sun and Starlit Dark as well. It's just a defend 4. It can get a Blight out of there, which isn't really doing much. You can also add an additional Fear, which is a nice tack on to the card here. The threshold isn't really particularly meaningful in the same way as it is with Drought. You don't really want to be playing Drought without that threshold. You really want to be hitting the threshold, but two strong cards, very, very good for me. I think certainly Sun is one of the best of the 8 in terms of all of that. So next up then we have Moon, and the 2 cards I have here, of course, are Domesticated Animals Go Berserk, and we have Call of the Dahan Ways. And by the way, I should have mentioned here, in terms of this little breakdown that I'm doing, I'm looking at all 8 cards. I'm going to rank these. In a top 3, I'm going to do a little bit of a weighting in this, which is going to contribute towards the data later on. So I'll reflect at the end of this in terms of which of the 3 that I've kind of marked as the top 3. I'm marking these not necessarily on how good the card is, but rather the importance of the threshold. That's how I'm ranking these. So it's the top 3 where you most want to hit the threshold. So again, not how good the card is, but how much you want or need to hit the threshold. And as I said, with Drought, for example, you really, really do want to hit that threshold to be able to take care of a land and make the Blight ad worth it. In this case here for Moon, we've got Domesticated Animals Go Berserk, and we've got Call of the Han Ways. Two strong cards. I'm lower on Call of the Han Ways, I would say, than probably the community is in general. I think it's only okay. I don't think it's a very great card. I think it's only fine. But it has its spots for sure. But Domesticated Animals Go Berserk, I think, is a much stronger card than Call of the Han Ways generally. But you don't need to hit the threshold on Domesticated Animals. It's just a defend 5 and a fear, which is strong. Call of the Han Ways, you're more likely to want to hit the threshold on that one for sure. But you can also pick off an explore and a build with that, given the unthresholded aspect of things. So yeah, it is what it is. Two good cards, but maybe less important to hit the thresholds on those ones. Up next then we've got Fire. So Fire is Unquenchable Flames, and it is Visions of a Fiery Doom. So in this case, Visions of a Fiery Doom, of course, it's a range 0, and you can push an Explorer or a town out of there. If you have the Fire, it's going to give you an extra fear. It's a fine card. It's not a very good card in truth, but I don't mind it. It's fast, but it's range 0. You don't need to hit the threshold on this card. It's the thing. It's nice, but you don't have to hit it. It's not meaningfully changing how the card works. Unquenchable Flames then in this case is range 2 of a Sacred Site. It's going to give you 1 damage to a building, and invaders do not heal damage at end of turn. And then if you've got 2 fire, you get to add a Badlands. So a little bit then the opposite of the Visions of a Fiery Doom. I think you really do want to hit your threshold on Unquenchable Flames. I think the card's not particularly great without the threshold, but if you have the threshold, it's good. So I generally draft that if I've got the access to the 2 fire, and usually if I have fire, I want access to a Badlands. So not a bad card. I'd say certainly they're much lower in terms of overall power level than the others, but also not quite as much in terms of the necessity for the fire, or for the threshold. Next up, we've got Air then, and we have 2 cards: Scour the Land and Sap the Strength of Multitudes. 2 strong cards in my opinion. Certainly Sap the Strength of Multitudes is up there, almost in S tier, maybe even in S tier, for how strong it is. And it's only got it's a defend 5 at range 0. If you have a single point of air, it's going to give you it's going to increase the range by 1. Which is really important. I mean, you really want to hit that air, because a range of 0 is not nearly as good as a range of 1. There's a massive difference between those two things. So as far as almost any of the cards in this entire list, Sap the Strength is the one you nearly most want to hit the threshold on. And with Scour the Land then, as I say, another Blight Ad card. I probably am higher on this than almost anybody. I think this is a strong card, but you do want to be hitting the air threshold on this as well. It's a Blight Ad card. You want to be getting there. If you're going to hit the 3 towns, you don't necessarily want to be doing that on the slow. That's usually a case where you probably want to group a couple of stuff up and then hit it before it builds the city. There are cases, and Habsburg Livestock is a good example where this will work even in the slow, because they don't really build cities inland. They build a lot of towns. So I think it's a really good card against Habsburg Livestock, but against the likes of France or something like Russia, where you maybe conglomerate explorers. You want to get there before they do the thing that they're about to do in a lot of cases. So you want that fast. So really important, I would say, for those. Up next then, we've got Water, and we've got Nature's Resilience and Strong and Constant Currents. So Strong Constant Currents here is it's going to give you an option to push stuff in the fast on a coastal land at range 0. We saw it in the previous playthrough I did, and then you also get you can potentially move the hand between coastal lands, and if you have, of course, the 2 water, you get to do both. So really nice. I really like having the 2 water on this one. A lot of the time it's not necessary. Again, in my previous playthrough you saw the town push was most important, but then I also got a little bit of a nice effect out of moving the hand. So it's a really nice one to have a threshold of, but not necessarily necessary. And then Nature's Resilient, which is also one of the best cards on this whole list. It's a defend of 6 at range 1 from a Sacred Site. It's a card that doesn't contain water. So it contains, it's got earth, plant, and animal tags, but then it has a threshold of 2 water, so a little bit funky there. And you can instead remove blight instead of doing the defend 6. So again, you're most often going to play this as the defend card and not as a blight removal card, so less important for the threshold on that one, I would say, for sure. Excuse me here, feeling a little bit smothered. I don't know whether that's drinking beer in the afternoon or what, or whether it's my meds from the stuff, but getting a little bit snotty and a little bit snorty. So apologies if that's coming across too clearly on the mic. Up next, then we have our earth cards. Earth in this case is going to give us Carapace Land and Steam Vents, another 2 strong cards, especially Carapace Land, which I would say is, again, probably another S tier miner. It's going to be range 0. It's going to give you a defend of 3. If you're targeting a land with animals, you get an additional range. If you have then 2 earth, it's going to give you +3 defend, so it's going to upgrade your defend from defend 3 up to defend 6, and that's a big deal. So you really want to be hitting the earth on this particular card. So the Steam Vents then is the other card here, and it's going to be it's going to cost 1, range 0, destroy an explorer. But if you have 3 earth elements, then it's going to, instead of destroying an explorer, it's going to destroy a town. A nice ability to get the upgrade on. It does come up, it certainly does. What I would say about that is, generally Steam Vents is your stop a build if you get in and ping the Explorer just on time, but sometimes you don't get to ping the Explorer on time, and you maybe jump in there and you kill the building before it ravages. So in that case, if you've got the threshold, you can sort of stop the ravage rather than stopping a build. That's the general kind of 2 main use cases for this card. So I would say Steam Vents, it's less important to hit the threshold, but still pretty important. So Earth is certainly up there on the list for importance here. Next up then we've got Plant, and we have 2 blight removal cards, which is a little bit unsurprising. We've got Renewing Rain, range 1 from a sacred site. If land is jungle or sands, remove a blight. And then the threshold is 3 plant, and you get to add a wilds. Not a great card for me, and not a card that you're necessarily struggling or rushing to try hit the threshold on either. If you need a blight removal, you need a blight removal. Yes, getting a wild is nice, but it's by no means a necessity. The other one here is Absorb Corruption then. So this is range 0, and you can say gather a blight or pay 1 energy to remove a blight. And if you have 2 plant, you get to do both. This card costs 1 on its own. So what we're essentially saying here is, if you can pay 2, and you have the 2 blight, two plants, should I say, you can gather a blight from an adjacent land and then remove it. I don't like this card. Funny enough, on the Discord the other day, this card came up and people were talking about that being a better card than a lot of people think. They were talking about it being a pretty okay card, actually. I think the context was Sunshine River. They were saying you could maybe put that in the hand of Sunshine River as a boost to that particular aspect. I don't like that card very much. I don't like those plant cards very much, and I certainly don't think that the importance of the thresholds is particularly strong on that element. Finally then we have Animal, and we have 2 cards here, Inflame the Fires of Life and Savage Maw Beasts. So Savage Maw Beasts is range 1 of a sacred site. If the target land is jungle or wetland, do a fear and a damage, and then if you have 3 animal, you can do an additional 1 damage. I think this card is really poor, generally speaking. I don't really draft this very much. It's only got 2 elements as well, but you know, you can ping an explorer, maybe you can ping a town. Again, the importance of having this in your game, I find it unimportant because I'm rarely using the card, so it's a little bit difficult for me to kind of validate or justify the importance of that. So I'll sort of just put it in meh. Inflame the Fires of Life then, this is a much better card here. It's range 1 of a sacred site as well, and you can either add a disease or do a fear and add a strife. And if you have 3 animal, you may do both. Definitely a much stronger card than the other card here. I would put this still somewhat low in terms of the necessity, and that's only simply because oftentimes one or the other is what you need, not necessarily both. That's not saying that having both is not good. It is, but I often find that when I play this card, kind of getting one of the effects is enough. It stops a ravage or it stops a build. Don't necessarily need to stop both right now. So very nice card if you have the threshold, but in terms of the total necessity, maybe not quite up there. So that's all our 8 our 8 elements covering 16 minor powers. The way I've scored this in the end is I didn't write the score. We'll get to the score later, but the 3 that I put the highest priority was Sun, especially for the drought threshold, Air, which the sap the string, the multitude was right up there, and then Earth, which the carapace land was right up there. So they're the 3, Sun, Air, Earth, that I figured were kind of most important on those. So we'll see how that plays later on. Again, we've got the choice events here. I'm not going to spend all day talking about these because you could really get into an analysis around these, which I'm not really going to do here. There are 9 rather than 8, which is a little bit funky. You've got 1 of each element, and then an extra one, which is kind of just it is what it is. So I'll very quickly talk what they are, and I'll bring them up on the screen. But for those listening, we're not going to go through and speak word by word on it. But you start off. We've got missionaries arrive, and this is going to give us basically two options here. So if I can't pay for it, essentially, I'm going to flip the top minor power on every board, and if it has Sun, I'm going to just push an explorer, but if it doesn't, I'm going to replace a hand with a town, which is awful. And then you return this to the deck. This keeps coming back, so this goes under the top 2 cards. So if you can't pay for missionaries, it goes back in the deck, and you keep drawing it, and you keep potentially converting your Dahan into town. So this one hurts quite a bit. This is a painful card. If you can pay for it, you pay with Sun. It's 4 energy aided by Sun, and then you get to you get to add some disease, generate some fear, and one of your ravages gets a bit stronger this turn. So it hurts you a little bit, but it goes away then. It doesn't keep coming back. So that's one you kind of do want to pay for. What I'm doing, by the way, in this particular section is I'm going to rank these in three sort of groups. I'm kind of talking about, like, I almost must pay for, the ones I really want to pay for, and then the ones I don't really particularly care about. So obviously most important to least important here. I've got missionaries in the middle. I really want to pay for it, but sometimes I just let it go because you might not, you've got that kind of option where, this might hurt, but I have to flip a card, and if I miss on the flip, then I don't have to convert them into hand. So sometimes you just kind of let it go. So that's in the middle category for me. Next up then, we've got the moon card, which is new species spread. Again, this is going to give you 2 options. This is aided by Moon here, but if you can't pay for it, you're going to basically do, again, for each board, you're going to discard the top minor power. So similar to what you do with the missionaries one. And if it's fast, you add a blight to a land with buildings, which is awful. But if you don't do anything. After resolving this card, return it to the event deck under the top 2 cards. So again, if it's fast, it's about a 50-50, I guess, in the deck. So you've kind of got a 50-50 to add a blight to a land with buildings, which is really bad, but it also might not come up. And then also in this case, if you pay for it, you can do 4 per player, again aided by Moon, and it's a fear per player, and then you get to add a beast to the board. So again, you'd really like to pay for this. I'm putting in the middle category, which is I really want to pay for it, but it's not an absolute necessity to pay for it. Okay, up next then we've got our kind of fire card, and this card is Sacred Sites Under Threat. And you've got 2 options here. You've got, if you don't pay for it, you're basically going to do each sacred site pushes an explorer or a town away, and then you have to remove a blight per player from the blight card. So hurts a little bit, but you get a little bit of good and some bad. Then if you can pay for it, this is a weird kind of templating stuff here. So it's only 3 energy per land where you do damage. So it's got this weird thing where you choose the option, but then within the option you've got 2 sub options, and it's aided by fire in this case. The 3 energy is aided by fire, of course, and then in each land with invaders and your sacred site, you can either do 2 damage or destroy a spirit. So what you can do in this case is you can choose this option, don't do the damage, and just destroy one of your presents. So you kind of don't have to pay for anything essentially. But if you do want to pay for it, you can deal some damage. So it's a kind of a weird, kind of clunky templating thing here. But I put this in don't care. It's in the bottom. You don't really want to pay for this card. You just don't care about it basically. There's another one here which is fire and or air. So I'll do this one now. The hand trade with the invaders. So this is essentially a triple option card. In this case, is the top option is you essentially do Dahan don't participate in ravages this turn, which can hurt, but it doesn't always come up. Especially if you set up a load of defense and your Dahan just don't want to participate and don't get the counterattack, that can hurt. Next up is the middle option, which is paid for 2 energy per player, aided by fire. So this is another fire card. And it says each spirit with Dahan in their lands has to destroy one of them and you get a fear. So you lose something, but you get a fear. So, you know, whatever, okay. And then the last one is 6 energy per player, aided by air. So really expensive, really hard to hit. And again, it's Dahan do not participate in ravages this turn, and each spirit forgets a power card. This better be good. From next turn on, each Dahan provides defend 1 in its land. So that is really good. So clearly here, that gives you the same ability as there's a major power, bargains of power protection that does it. But look, ultimately this card is, I don't really care. I don't necessarily really want to pay for it. I'm happy to take that top option, which is just Dahan don't participate, and let's move on. Next up then we have Rising Interest in the Island, and this one is 2 options. If you don't pay for it, you have to return the top card of the Invader deck to the box. Ouch. On each board, add a town to a land without one. Ugh. Ouch. That's 2 pretty bad things, especially returning a card to the Invader deck. You accelerate the Invader deck. That's awful. What's the alternative then? If I can pay for it by 4 energy aided by air, return the top fear card to the box instead. Okay, now we're talking. And during the next normal ravage, each building is going to deal +1 damage. So they do give you a little bit of a bad on top of the good there. But we're talking about the difference here. We're talking about a swing of return the top card of the Invader deck to the box versus return the top card of the Fear deck. So really bad versus really good. That's essentially generating 4 fear per player when you get that thing, which is huge. So for me, this is in a almost must pay. That's like right at the top in terms of importance. Like, I do not want to hit the bad side of that card. I'm putting that in oh no, actually no, I didn't. I put it in really want to pay. Interesting. I thought I had put that in the must pay, but I didn't. I put it in the middle category. It's flirting with the top category for sure here. Sometimes you might get away with doing the thing if you just simply can't pay for it, and you do the accelerate the Invader deck. If you're in one of those spots where it's like the middle of the 2s or something like that, or maybe even towards the end where you're in the middle of the 3s and it doesn't meaningfully change which card is coming up next, you might slightly get away with it. It's maybe slightly lesser, hurts you slightly less. But if you're like right on the cusp and you're almost going 2 to 3, but you've still got a 2 left, and you then go and accelerate that 2 away and you hit the 3 a turn earlier, that hurts so badly. Okay, next up, here's our first must pay, Years of Little Rain. We alluded to it earlier on. Most people will be familiar with this. At this point, if you don't pay for it, it's going to, for each board, discard the top minor power, and if it lacks water, you're going to add a blight, but it also gives your buildings either to hand -1 health. So it actually, even if you take the bad option on this card, it's going to weaken all of the buildings on the island this turn, and maybe add blight. But if you do pay for it, it's going to win you the game. This just reads win you the game. It's cost 4 energy per player, aided by water, and it's each spirit may add a presence to a land, to one of their lands with the hand, which is just broken. You get to proliferate yourself. So of course, if you can in any way pay for that card, you're throwing cards, you're throwing energy, you're throwing absolutely anything you can at that card to pay for it. That's a must pay. Next up then, we've got Remnants of a Spirit's Heart, and this is 2 options here. Top option, if you don't pay for it, is it's going to give Dahan +10 health this turn, which is fair enough. And then also in lands with Dahan, invaders have +1 health this turn, so it makes the invaders a bit harder to kill as well as the Dahan. But if you do pay for it, this is going to be 4 energy aided by Earth in this case, and it's going to give Defend from Spirits 4 lower per land this turn. So if you pay for this card, it's going to reduce your defend by 4 per land. Wow. Oh my god, that hurts. So you paying for this and it's going to wreck your defend. This had better have a big outcome. The second outcome is during one future spirit phase, players may jointly decide to grant defend 4 to all lands that turn. Oh baby. Okay, now I see where all of that investment is going. That's really good. The ability that you get is strong, okay? So, you know, any one turn on a future turn, you get to give every single land defend 4 this turn. That's really good. However, the cost is very high. You have to obviously pay for this card and you have to reduce all of your defend this turn. So the payment for this is just too high. If you don't pay for it, it's just like, whatever, you know, I'll give my Dahan plus 10, I'll protect my Dahan, probably not even going to matter, and the invaders will get slightly stronger. It might cost you a little bit in terms of maybe a slow player power with damage, or maybe a Dahan counter attack, but for the most part, this is a card where I'm not putting effort into this. There will be the odd time where that comes up and it's amazing, but for the most part, I don't really care about that. It's not something I really want to pay for. Next up then is our second and last entry into the must pay category for me, and it's Lesser Spirits Imperiled. This is going to give us two options. We're going to have to pay 4 energy per player aided by plant, but if I don't do that, I'm going to have each spirit gains 1 energy. Okay, not bad. Discard 1 minor power per player from the deck. For each plant, remove a blight from the blight card, returning it to the box. Okay, that's not great news. For each animal, destroy a Dahan in a land with blight. Ugh. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to basically lose a bunch of blight potentially, and also lose a bunch of Dahan potentially as well. So yeah, that's a bit tough. That's a bit tough. But what are we paying for if we get it? 4 energy aided by blight. Each spirit destroys one of their presence. Oh god, we're still paying more for this. That's awful. But what else? Each spirit gains 1 permanent element for the rest of the game. Choose separately now, and there it is. There it is, baby. I love this card. I love getting to pay for this card. In truth, maybe it's a really want to pay rather than a must pay. This isn't necessarily winning you the game the same way Years of Little Rain will, but it's huge. It's absolutely huge. The amount of times when I've gotten this, paid for it, gotten 1 extra element, and then upgraded my like slow power an 8 or something like that for the slow power is just, it's fantastic. I'm always wanting to pay for that. It's between really want to and must pay, but I'm keeping it a must pay for now. And then finally, the last one here is Life's Balance Tilt. This is going to be our animal card. If I don't pay for it, it's on each board, remove a beast and add a disease. And then also for each board, discard the top minor power, and if it's fast, add a blight. Okay, so we're doing this 50-50 stuff, adding a blight, and then it's also giving invaders and Dahan -1 health this turn. So okay, it also hurts invaders. So 3 different things that's going on. And then also if you pay for it, it's 4 energy per player aided by animal. And this is going to be on each board, add a beast and remove a disease. So this is the opposite of the other one. So the first effect, if you don't pay, is basically swapping a beast for a disease. And now you're basically swapping a disease for a beast. Not quite a swap because you don't have to have the disease there. You'll always get to add the beast, which is quite nice. And then it also does, for each board, discard the top minor power. And if it's slow, remove a blight, which is nice. So you get to put the blight back on the card as well. But then it also has invaders and Dahan have +1 health this turn. So it's actually making your invaders harder to kill. This one is, it's probably the most conditional of nearly all of them in terms of which category I want to put this in. I have it written down as don't care to pay for this necessarily. There will be spots where I do really care about paying for this. Obviously, it gives you a kind of a mix of some good and some bad on each, and I love the design of this card. I think it's maybe the best design of all of them. because it gives you a little bit of good and a little bit of bad, which I think is probably the best way that these are designed here. I think I remember hearing Ted Vesina speak about that before, where he said they think the events they designed later, of which this is in Nature Incarnate, are stronger on the choice events because they give you a mix. So either way, it's somewhere between don't care and really want to pay, depending on the nature of the game. Now, as it happens, they're just closing this little section out here. I listed the three most important ones here for my scoring are going to be Years of Little Rain, Lesser Spirits, Imperiled, and I believe I chose Rising Interest of the Island as the third. It's the one with the air element, and the reason I chose that rather than Missionaries or New Species is because you actually have two events which care about air, which I felt was the tiebreaker. So Rising Interest probably about on average the same as the other ones in terms of how much I want to pay for it, but because you've got two air elements, I gave that the nod. So those are the three. It's going to be the water, it's going to be the plant, and it's going to be the air in this case. So that's all of that. That's the vast majority of the presentation of that, apart from the data. So we do have a section coming up here now around data. And I'm very conscious we're 2 minutes and 11 into an episode right now, and now is not going to be necessarily a great time to start going deep diving into big deep dives on data. So I need to be a little bit careful here. The other thing I'm conscious of as well is that there is, of course, going to be an element or a portion of people who are listening to this via, of course, the podcast medium and not being able to see their screen. So I don't want to spend too much time bringing up stuff and looking really, really deep into everything that's on a screen right now. So I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to share my screen here, which is not something that I've done, I believe, on the podcast to date. So I'm going to move over here and I'm going to show the screen to everybody who's watching. For those of you listening along, I will, of course, describe what we're seeing here. It's going to be a spreadsheet, and it's going to have a whole bunch of stuff here. You see at the top here, I've got a spreadsheet which is breaking down each of our 8 elements and showing various things. You'll see along the side here, I've got things like the count of numbers of majors and minors. I've got the total costs of the majors and minors, and I've got things like average costs in there as well. And then you'll see I've got this kind of effect breakdown. So you remember on previous episodes, I had done a breakdown of the kind of actions in the game. We saw before with the Scotland episode and also the, I think the Brandenburg-Prussia episode, where we sort of broke down all the various actions and whether they were good or bad versus the scenario. I've done a similar type of a thing here, but I've done a little bit more of a grouping. So before we had like 20 actions or more, or however many it was. I've condensed these down into kind of 10 categories and used these 10 categories to look at what each of the various elements in the game can do. Now, again, I'm not going to deep dive into this. I'm going to give a summary as part of this, as part of my episode here. I will share this file, so I'm going to make this file shareable, and I'll put the link to it down in the description of the episode here. And you can go ahead and you can take a look at this in your own spare time if you'd like, to kind of dig into what's available here. But just to quickly go through what the effects are here. So there's 10 of them, as I say. These are the kind of core 10 things that you do sort of in a game of Spirit Island. So we have defend, and I've included strife adds within the defend here. You've got control of invaders. You've got deal damage, destroy, or remove invaders in some way, and that includes sort of transforming them as well here. So I kind of grouped a whole bunch of stuff within this, and it's going to be the most prevalent category for pretty much every single element here. Then I've got skips, prevents, and change invader actions. Then we've got add, control, or change the behavior of Dahan. We have then add tokens, and as I say here, non-strife, because I took the strife adds and I put them into the defend category. Then we've got move or remove blight. We have give support. We have change the island, which is kind of, as we said before, remove an island tile, weave lands together, that kind of thing. And then we have generate fear. So they're the 10 that I included as part of this analysis. And as you'll see here on the screen, and as I'm describing, I have a section for each of the 8 elements, and I have a little breakdown of minor and major counts for each of those categories, and then a total. So you'll see basically for each of the 8 here, I'm going to briefly describe here what each of them have, and where their kind of main prevalence is for game effect. So, for example, Sun here, you'll see a lot of the kind of higher numbers of what they do are within defend, control, invaders, damage, and support. Now, all of the 8 elements in the game here are all generally the most of the effects that they have are going to be those top 3, right? So it's going to be some form of defend, some form of controlling invaders, and some form of killing invaders. And that is unsurprising to me, because they are generally the kind of 3 sort of core things that you can do within a game. So for each of them, they're all going to kind of have most of their weighting in within those 3. But you can see here, Sun actually has support as their 3rd rather than control. So they're going to do more supporting than control, which is a little bit out of the ordinary for the rest. So they've got here 22 cards, for example, that deal damage. Their second best is going to be defend, and then the third best is going to be support. What they don't do is skip invader actions. They've no cards to do that. They've very little that adds tokens. They've only got 1 single token adding card as well. So that's a little bit telling here. So as we move across, the one thing, by the way, I should mention here now, the first table that's on this list, I've got a breakdown of each of the elements, and I'll quickly skip through them now. Then what we've got is we've got a couple of other tables here. I've got one table then that kind of consolidates all of the data within those various categories, so it's just a kind of a different way to view them. And then the final category then that I do is I do a scoring, where I essentially rank each of the available elements, and I give a final outcome of which the best are. So I'm going to, as I say, kind of talk through this a little bit quickly. There's no point in me going through and spending half an hour sort of listing out everything, because it'll just be it'll be too heavy, it'll be too boring. So there's no point in doing that. So just going through the other elements here. So Moon then, as I say, again, its most prevalent thing is dealing damage or removing invaders. Obviously here, dealing damage and removing are 2 very different things, and transforming, of course, as well. So there's different flavors of what that look like, but yeah, I don't have the granularity here. So the most things it does, it's going to deal damage, then it's going to defend as its second, and then it's going to control as its third. One thing to point out here, that Moon has 7 token adding abilities as opposed to 1 from Sun. So there's where the big difference comes there. They also, of course, have 5 cards that generate fear, which is the highest, I believe, of any of the elements. Next up then we have Fire, and Fire has a whopping 32 cards that deal damage, destroy, or remove invaders, which is by far the most of any of the elements, which is probably unsurprising. The second thing that they have is actually adding tokens, and they have 10 cards that add tokens. So Fire very much appreciates and enjoys adding tokens. I believe that is the highest of any of the rest. And the third thing that it does then is going to be controlling invaders, which are 9 effects there. It also has then support as well, is going to be 7, which is going to be, I think, very high as far as the support pairs. So it really does actually quite enjoy supporting all of the other the other spirits, as well as adding tokens. So quite utilitarian, I would say. Next up then we have Air, and Air is going to be 18 in terms of dealing damage or destroying or removing invaders. I think that may well be the lowest of any of the elements. Second thing it does is it controls invaders, and that's 14, and I think that may well be the highest of any of the rest. I think if I scroll across, yeah, 14 is going to be the highest, so it wins in that category. The third thing then it does is defend, and 10 powers are going to defend in there. So again, that's kind of third place. Otherwise then of note, it has a support. It's going to also have 7 support cards, and it's going to have 7 token adds, so it also really does appreciate adding tokens as well. And something also to point out, that it has 4 skip or prevent cards, which I think is among the highest as well. Water then is next up. Water has 22 damage dealing cards, so we're back up a little bit here, up in towards near the top. And then 11, it has defend, is going to be 11 cards, which is, I think, one of the best, which is Water, and I was a little bit surprised by that. And then third thing it does is going to be control invaders as well here. So again, that's kind of that trifecta at the top. It has 9 support cards. So actually, I thought Fire might well be the most, but now that I look at it, now that I remember, Water is actually the single most supportive element in the game, according to what I've done on my breakdown of my analysis. What I should also mention, and I maybe should have mentioned at the top, is these breakdowns that I've done of these cards. I have broken each individual card into one single category only. So there won't be any overlap here, which is important. So if you were to, for example, go and right now take out every single support card that in the minor power deck that contains water, you may well not have it line up to exactly 9. Now you probably will, but it might be 10, it might be 11, and that would be because that there was maybe another category that I felt that the card belonged in more. So of course, there are some cards that do X or Y. Some of them were a little bit tricky to find a place to put them. So I had to make my best guess in a lot of cases as to where something would lie. And for me, that generally was just which are you more likely to pick. That was kind of the way I broke those down. So just in case you're looking and you're doing counting and looking at the data in the background and wondering separately why those don't quite fully add up, well, that's going to be the case. So that is going to be all of that. Up next then we have Earth, and Earth is going to have a whopping 17 defend, and that is the most out of any of the elements. So Earth wins this particular category. It only has 6 controlling invaders, which I think is actually the worst of all of the rest. So that's very low, obviously, from Earth. There they didn't really have the trifecta the same way that the others did. They have a 20 deal damage cards, which I thought was actually a bit low. I thought that might have been a little bit higher. And what else do they have here of note? They have 5 skip and prevent cards, which actually I think wins. That's the most. What else do they have here? They've got only 1 add control or change behavior of the hand, which is very low there. And do they have anything else of note? They have changing the island. 3 cards that change the island. I actually only have 3 in that category, but all 3 of them are Earth cards. Finally then, or not finally, penultimately we have Plant. Plant is going to have 24 deal damage cards, which is going to be its highest thing, of course. Defend and Control both come in with 10 each. And then anything else of note here, they have Move and Remove Blight is going to be 6 cards for Plant, which is among the highest there. So that's going to be very, very nice for them. And they have 0 cards which generate Fear, which was quite interesting, and generally because people are usually at ease when they're in nature and not really fearing the plants on the floor around them. Although they're probably not too close to Keeper in that case, because Keeper is something that you should feel a little fearful for if you're the invaders. Okay, and then finally we have Animal here, and that is going to close out with 21 deal damage cards. It's going to have 12 defend, which is actually pretty high. I think that's second place. Not too many control powers on invaders, with only 8, but it has 6 cards which control the behavior of the hand, which is fairly high. And actually, now that I look at it, it has 10 token add cards, and I do believe that's the highest for any, or at least it's joined with fire for token adds. So they do quite enjoy adding tokens in the animal faction, and that is going to be the 8 elements. So that's the kind of breakdown of what each of them do. As I say, there's the file. I'm going to link it. Go and have a look so you can get the kind of detailed breakdown. And of course, I've kind of brought them up on screen, so if you want, you can kind of pause the video and take a little look through and what each of those look like. That's the kind of breakdown by element. What I've done then, as I say, the next thing that I've done down in the next table here is I've done then a sort of a transposition of that data, where instead of looking at it by element, I've now looked at it by category. So that's your kind of raw data at the top, if you will. Then I've got this table down here which looks at the same data again, and I've actually even gone through some of them now, where I sort of already showed you which were the winners and losers in the category. So again, just kind of skipping over what this looks like. There's a couple of extra sections within here. So you'll see the first thing that I've done here actually in this table is I have looked at the spirit breakdown. So I've done the spirit breakdown. So if I scroll to the bottom of the page here, you'll see there's a whole section on the spirits. And what I've done is I've taken the primary and secondary elements of every spirit and I've listed them out in this box. So again, I'm not going to go through this all in detail. I'll just give you a couple of examples here. Lightning Swift Strike, it's primary fire, it's secondary air, for example. And I've listed out all of these in here. There's a couple where you had tri-elements. So for example, Grinning Trickster Stirs Up Trouble here is primary air and its secondary is fire and moon. I've tried my absolute best to not do this with most spirits. Ocean's Hungry Grasp is another one that's primary water, and its secondary is earth and moon. But I only really gave 2 secondary elements if it if it was extremely close. So there's a lot in here that would have 3 elements or even 4 elements as part of their identity, but I've only listed 2 because they were the 2 most obvious ones. So the vast majority of them on this list are going to have a single primary and a single secondary. There's a couple in here just to point out, for example, Starlight actually only has 1 element that I've listed as its primary, which is moon, of course, and I didn't list a secondary because it doesn't have one. All of them are said secondary elements, so I didn't list any. And there was one other example to point out here is Wounded Waters Bleeding. I've actually listed as 2 primary elements as the water and the animal, because there is actually no difference within their whole elemental breakdown. They're exactly the same from kind of innate and also unique perspective, so I gave that a primary scoring under both categories. So that's kind of what I did in terms of listing them out. Then, of course, what I did is I totted all those up, naturally enough. So then you can see here there's a kind of a total primary and a total secondary sort of total rows at the bottom here, and you can see then within them that the scoring of this. So from a primary element perspective, the winners in this particular category were fire and air. They both have the most at 6 spirits for that identity as their primary element. After that, then there are 4 that are tied in second place with 5, and that's going to be moon, water, earth, and plant. Are going to be the ones back in on 5 spirits. Finally, then you've got penultimately you've got animal with 4 total spirits, and then interestingly there are only 2 spirits that I could see in the game that have sun as their primary element, and that is Hearth Vigil and Relentless Gaze of the Sun, which is interesting. And even Hearth Vigil is almost up for question, but I sort of did see it as sun being the primary one, animal being its secondary. But yeah, so that was quite interesting. Sun is very much in last place on that list. Then on the secondary list, things look a little bit different here. So if we look at the secondary list, then there's 2 joint first place on this one, and that for me is moon and air. They're both coming in joint first place. There are 8 spirits that have moon and air as their secondary innates, but sun is now coming in second place. So while sun was very much in last place for the primary elements, it's in second place here on the secondary elements. There's a whole bunch of other spirits that have sun as their secondary element, so that has 7 total spirits. And then there were a couple back in third place, which was I think what was it? It was fire and earth that are coming back with 5 points each. So that was kind of all of that, and that was the scoring. Just to show you in terms of the box up here, I have them listed out. You can see them numerically listed into this table here, where you can see I've kind of listed 7, 8s and so on. So again, not going through all those in detail, but that's where they are. And moving on through the table then, so that was the spirits. Then we've got the breakdown of minors and majors. So just to point out here that all 8 elements have 38 cards. So there's an exact parity for all 8 elements. They all have 38 minors in the deck, which is really, really nice and clean. But it's worth pointing out here that it's not the case for the major powers. So for major powers, there is 1 spirit element, which is water, which has 31 majors. And all of the rest have 30 except for fire and animal, which have 29. So there is not a nice parity in the same way with the minors. The majors, you have water very much in first place with 31, and fire and animal only have 29 each, which I found quite interesting. The rest, as I say, have 30. Moving across then, we look at the average cost of the minors and the majors within the elements. So here, for example, we can see that fire and air are both in first place on the cheapest. So their average minor cost across the 38 cards for fire and air is going to be 0.61 energy. But if you can see, for example, then moon is coming in last place, and moon is going to be 0.71. So there's a kind of a 0.1 difference between the average cost on the minors there. So fire and air being the winners, moon coming in last place, and then the others are kind of somewhere in the mixer in the middle. So also quite interesting. I thought that would be closer in terms of the cost on those. But yeah, 0.61 to 0.71. Maybe it doesn't look like a lot, but just something to bear in mind. Again, if you're drafting and your spirit is very, very tight on energy, the average kind of cost on that, your fire and airs are cheaper and your moons are more expensive. But if we look then to the majors, and the average cost of the majors is actually an even bigger disparity from first to last place here. So very much in first place then we have Animal. So we heard earlier on in the episode where Beta Jin was saying about Animal being the kind of the most prevalent in terms of the highest major threshold. It's also the cheapest for majors as well. So it's going to be 3.59 on the Animal, but we have all the way up to 4.34 for Fire. So Fire is actually the most expensive major element, which I actually was fully convinced was going to be Earth. Earth is back in second place, but Fire is the most expensive. So Animal being the cheapest and Fire being the most expensive. Moving across then to major thresholds then. So looking a little bit detail around the element pips first of all. So we heard before about Animal being sort of very prevalent on the max thresholds. If we look at the pips across all of them, it's fairly close. The fewest element pips on all of the majors is going to be Plant. There are 57 total, and then Animal is going to be actually the most, tied in first place. So it's going to be 63 for Animal and 63 for Earth. So fairly well distributed there. Not a huge difference between those, but there is a much bigger difference when we look at the maximum thresholds. So this is what we talked about earlier from Beta Jin, where we said Animal has 10 cards where it is the sole highest element number on the card. That's going to be 10 for Animal. It's going to be joint second place is going to be 8 for Sun and for Air. And all the way back in last place is going to be Water. There are only 4 cards which have Water as the highest element requirement, which I was quite surprised by this. I thought that was a really big disparity there from 4 all the way up to 10. And essentially what that's just saying there is you're more likely to need Animal tags to threshold the average major than you are for Water. More than twice as likely to need an animal as you are as a Water. That's at least one way to look at that stat. The statisticians in the chat will be jumping in thinking that statement you just made there is not quite true, but it's a simplification of the thing at least. And the next category then, and this is going to be more or less the last category before we quickly skip over the effects that we already looked at, and this is going to be S and A tier minors and majors. So what I've done in this case is I have jumped out and I have looked at Red Revenges, minor breakdown and major breakdown from his channel, because I didn't want to turn this into a review from me and my opinion on the card. So I just took what he has as part of his minor and major breakdown, and I've essentially classified each of the cards in his S and A tiers for both minors and majors, and I've just counted up essentially how many of each element is appearing in those lists. So for him, when he did his minor breakdown, there were 32 cards that went within S and A tier, so about a third of the deck, and then the split across all of the elements for those looks like Fire in last place. Only 9 cards contained Fire, up to 15 contained Earth, so it's quite a big difference there. 6 more cards contained Earth, and then it's a smattering across the rest. Sun is in second place and Air in third place there. And then with the majors then, so again from the S and A tier perspective, what he's done, he had I'm glad I remember this, he had 22 cards in his. He included Vengeance of the Dead, but he was including the exploratory version. I don't play with that, and therefore I've excluded it, so I have 21 cards counted. And here we see an even bigger disparity on the inclusion of the various elements, and Sun, unsurprisingly, is the big winner here. So I think we heard from at least one person in the comments saying how Sun was definitely the strongest element, and here we see it represented with 14 of the 21 cards contain Sun, which is an extremely high percentage compared to, for example, Fire, which is only 6 of the 21, Water, which is only 6 of the 21, and also Moon and Plant, which are only 7. So all of those are half or worse than Sun. So Sun is the clear winner here, with Air in second place and Earth and Element tied for third. So that's okay. And what I have then here, you can see these are all the various 10 effects that I already talked through up above, so I can just quickly skip through them. I'll just list the winner in each of the categories here. So for defend, we said Earth was the winner. For controlling invaders, we said air is the winner. For damage and remove, we said fire is the winner. For skip and prevent, it's going to be Earth again as the winner. For the hand interaction, it's going to be animal as the winner. For token add, then we have a joint first place with fire and animal. For removing blight, plant is the winner with sun in close second place. Support is going to be sun as the winner with water in a second in a close second place. And then changing the island, we've got 3 tied in first place for moon, water, and earth, all of which appear on the 3 cards that are Weave Together, Fabric of Place, the Dream of the Untouched Land, and the Cast Down in the Briny Deep. Finally, then, one clear winner in the fear category, and it should be no surprise to anybody that moon was the winner of that particular category. So that is the data, and that is the sort of different transposition of all of the data. There is one final step left, and that is what you can see right below, which is more or less a copy of the exact table above, where I just took all of the data points and I just ranked them essentially, and I gave a point of 1, 2, or 3 in each of those categories for the winners of all of the elements. So you can see here, just for example, in the spirits, primary colors, air, as we talked about before, was tied with fire for the worst place, and so on. And then all the way across, you can see in all the various categories I just talked through, you can see each of the different elements are given a point of either 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point, depending if they finished in first, second, or third place. And I've done that all the way across, and I've totted everything up, and I am happy to announce that there is a clear winner in first place, the absolute best element according to me, and this is, of course, then by extension, not to be questioned because we're on my channel, but I can announce happily that the best element in the game is, in fact, air. And in the second and third place, I'm a little bit less happy to announce that there's a tie, which I wasn't really pleased with, but the tied second and third place is going to be sun and earth, and probably a little bit unsurprising given that I was announcing those particular elements across quite a few of the categories here. You can see that air, winning with 33 points, is 5 points clear of any of the sun or earth in second place. That's a lot. 33 versus 28, like there's a big difference there, and air's the winner, which is amazing. You'll see all the way back as well, it's last place fire, which is not super hot for them, unfortunately. That's almost half of what air got, so really big gap back to last place. I'll just quickly talk through the rest here. So it's fire in last, then you've got moon on 19 points is coming second last, then tied then after that it's going to be water and plant. They each had 20 points. Coming up then to the next spot, we have animal, which is coming in fourth place, and it has 24 points. And then, as I say, joint second and third is going to be sun and earth with 28 points. And then finally, in first place, as we said, it is air, 33 points, stands alone on the podium, and what a job it did. So I did mention throughout the episode, if I had any sort of elemental alignment, it would probably be with air, because I enjoyed those kind of funky mind, tricky kind of stuff, especially with the blue from Magic, and I quite enjoyed getting to see that air won out. So look, that's a big deep dive. We're really long into this episode, and this is by far my longest podcast episode so far. I hope that was enjoyable. I hope that wasn't going too much over the heads of people who are trying to listen in and didn't quite have the visual cues that maybe some of the the obviously the other viewers were able to have there. So it was a combination of trying to make sure I took my time to not go through too too quickly, but also I didn't want to spend all day. So hopefully I got the balance of that right. If I didn't, please do, of course, let me know in the comments. And if you did enjoy it and you'd like to see more of that type of thing in the future, happy to hear that as well. But look, that's the kind of data breakdown. I thought there was one final funny thing just to note as well, given that we now have the announcement of which spirits were, or which elements were the best. I did a very quick check and I looked at again Red Revenge's spirit ranking, so his tier list on his spirits, and I look at his X tier, which is his kind of above S tier, the ones that break the game the most. There are 5 total spirits in the category of X tier for him. That is Fractured, Green, Stone, Dances Up Earthquakes, and Heart Vigil, in that order. That's the 5 that he has as the 5 best spirits in the game. And let's look from the 3 elements that won the game. Let's go through them one by one. Fractured, Sun and Air. Green, none. Stone, Sun and Earth. Dances Up Earthquakes, Earth. And then Heart Vigil, Sun, Air, and Earth. It has all 3. And it actually has Animal, which came in 4th place as well. So not surprising to me at all that Heart Vigil is the stats monster, and it just so happens to be all of the best colours in the game, the best elements in the game as well. So that's been all of that. I really enjoyed that. It's been a long one, and hopefully that was kind of something which was meaningful for you listening in at home. Something that you can keep in mind in your future games as well. There's some data points in there that are worthy of sort of thinking about. Like I said before, nobody's really sitting around the table and thinking algorithms and getting their calculators out and kind of checking things as they're going along in the game. But having some of those basic heuristics in your mind about like, oh, well, air is maybe the cheapest, or, I think actually one of the stats in there that I didn't call out was like, plant has the cheapest majors overall. So actually, if I'm plant, I can get away with maybe drafting a major earlier than normal, like that kind of thing. Some of those little kind of guidelines are useful and helpful things to have. And if you want, as I say, I'll share the link to the list for you to go and take a look. But that's been all of that, and we're now 2 minutes 40 something into the episode, and I haven't talked yet about my playthrough the other night, so it's not a great time to start digging into details about playthroughs and things like that. But I will just spend a couple of minutes, very, very, very short few minutes, talking about what happened in that playthrough. It was, of course, Starlight, and I did Scotland 6, I did extra board tile, and I did Elemental Invocation, and goddamn was this a brutal difficulty game. Oh my god, it was extremely difficult, and I did not help myself by making some stupid mistakes. The opening Explorer is not supposed to happen when you're playing with a single board, so I made the mistake where I did the opening Explorer, which I shouldn't have done. I also, when I flipped the Blight card into the Healthy Island and then later on into the Blighted Island, I didn't do the double blight allowance, which you're supposed to do on an extra board. I only put a single blight allowance, so I absolutely crippled myself in an already cripplingly difficult game. But I did also do one thing accidentally, which was like during the game I did playing fear cards with per player, and I did 2 players even though I was only playing as 1 player. I just accidentally did that a couple of times, so there's a couple of little mistakes along the way there which weren't ideal. Maybe they balanced themselves out, I'm not sure. It was a crucifyingly difficult game. It was comfortably, I would say, as difficult as most 6-6s that I've played. I forgot to tell you to go and watch the thing before I started talking about it, so I will, of course, at this point in the show I'll do the linky thing up here, and I do encourage you to go and watch the game, because it was a super interesting one and super difficult, so you get to see how kind of I approach some of those really hard games. If you've come back now or you're happy enough to hear a spoiler, I lost, which is I'm happy enough to lose, because I don't always want to be winning on the channel, and I'm more than happy to lose a game that difficult. But it wasn't a bad run of it. I made a good effort of it, and I wasn't that far away from winning, I would say. If I had have remembered the proper blight allowance for the card in the right spots, I think I could have potentially won that game. Very quickly into some notes about the build and things like that before we close out the show here. There was an interesting turn one with Starlight where I would usually do a very templated thing where I'd play kind of two Boon Reimagining and the Shape the Self Anew, very standard opening with Starlight. But there was a turn where I drew, I think, Lure of the Unknown, and I had an opportunity to gather a thing to prevent a build, and I ended up doing that, which I almost never do with Starlight. So it's nice to think on your toes a little bit, and not always just go ahead and just do the templated thing that you do all the time with a particular spirit. Volcano's another one where I almost always make the same opening turn, but it's nice to be on guard a little bit and be aware that if you draft a particular card on your first turn, it might be worth actually changing your mind. Now, as it happened, the play that I made ended up not mattering, and I could have just done my standard opening and my game would have actually been better off if I had have skipped my funky big brain play and just done the standard stuff. It actually would have worked out better for me, but that is just the way it goes. And what else in terms of the build? I went for the +3 button, which I think is probably fairly non-standard, I would say, in the community. Non-standard. Because of obviously elemental invocation, you need your energy, and I found kind of a couple early mages and things like that I wanted to spend my energy on, so I think that worked out quite well. I obviously leaned into Earth in the game. It was a very, very defensive game, and I of course had the kind of elemental tokens on the corners of a couple of lands, so that came up quite a bit, and it worked out quite well. But I was an overly defensive build, and as a result I couldn't really get rid of the plastic. I was doing a lot of kind of skipping. I found Paralyzing Fright, and then later on in the game I found Indomitable Claim, two of the absolute best cards you can possibly find, two of the best cards for Starlight, but I couldn't find a big hammer, and I was just defending and I was just skipping, and the plastic was just building up, and I just couldn't turn the corner at the end. So very, very nice for a lot of the game, and you can sort of see how that kind of stuff plays very well into high difficulty, and as I say, well recommended and encouraged for you to go and kind of check that stuff out. But you can see me digging at the end to try find the big major, so I was kind of building towards that. It got to a point in the game where I had to build towards the slow to fast node on Starlight's panel to try. I was digging for Rumbling Earthquakes was the card I really wanted at the end, so I was giving myself an out. I was playing towards that out for at least a turn or two, and then I was just digging at the end. I never found it. I wasn't able to turn the corner and pick up the win, but you can sort of see how every turn my cogs were turning, and I was thinking towards, okay, I'm still defensive. How am I turning the corner and getting to the offensive? And next turn is I'm going to draft another major. Oh, here's another defensive one. How am I, and I'm still just kind of every turn just sort of thinking through, and you can see me planning out things like, when am I hitting the reclaim button? I'm 2 turns away. When am I taking that option to pick up the one now so that I can do it next turn, and all that kind of stuff. So again, if you like Starlight and you're trying to kind of figure some stuff out about Starlight and looking for maybe some tips and things like that, I would again recommend you to go and check that one out. But that was that. Elemental Invocation, as I say, in itself, I put a couple of the elements on the board. It was a big hit of difficulty by accelerating the Invader deck, and ultimately I don't believe that the benefit it gave me cancelled out that level of difficulty. So I think the Elemental Invocation was at least +1 difficulty. The extra board here, especially putting the wrong amount of Blight, was at least a +5 difficulty. So I listed it as a difficulty 16 in the thumbnail and the video, and for me it's every bit the point of 16, the 16 points of difficulty. So super, super difficult. I lost, but I gave it a good run, and I got reasonably close, and as I say, well worth watching. So that's it. We're coming up on 3 hours here for a podcast. It's extremely long for me to sit in a room and talk to the wall. If you've been sticking with me up until now, I really, really, genuinely, massively appreciate you being here. There were some sound issues I think I mentioned already in the last playthrough. I hope we've managed to get rid of them with the better setup with the thing up here, and all the rest of it. So I hope all of that has worked out okay. That's going to be it for this. We do, of course, have a moment or two to mention what's coming up next. So we are going back to the Adversary Series, which is good news. We did 4, then we took a break, and now we're going back. And as I said before, the top 4 spirits for me are not spirits. The top 4 adversaries are very fixed. We had the bottom four. They're a little bit variable. I'll absolutely hear arguments around which order they can go in, and I'm happy enough to kind of move them around accordingly. The top four for me, it's not the case. They're very fixed. Fourth place is very fixed for me, and it's very much a difficulty 10. I think it stands on its own as a difficulty 10. And as I said before, that's relative scoring perspective. So this for me is very definitely a step above Scotland and Brandenburg Prussia, and that is, of course, Habsburg Mining Expedition. Absolutely brilliant. Some people have things to say about these in terms of what they like and don't like. I hear some criticisms against them. I'm not having it. I think they're excellent. I love the design of HME. It's funky and it's complex, and some people don't like it. They think it's maybe fiddly. I think it's brilliant. I think they give you a whole different dynamic to the game that you didn't get from any adversary up until this moment. We'll talk about what they do next time, but for me, they are very much a difficulty 10. Very, very tough. And we, of course, do have three options for who we're going to play into them. So we've got three options coming up here. We're going to start with the easy option, and this is, of course, going to be a poll that's available going live together with this episode. So if you're listening to this, please do, after you're finished, go over and vote in the poll. But these are going to be your three options that are going to be available. So first of all, it's going to be our easy team, and it's going to be Eyes Watch from the Trees, and it's going to be Sharp Fangs behind the leaves with the encircle aspect. So this is your kind of sword and shield team, if you will. So Eyes Watch is obviously very defensive, and defense tends to be pretty good against HME. I've checked, by the way, the Red Revenge's matchup axis. I like to do that when I'm preparing my teams here. So he has this Eyes Watch ranked as an S tier matchup, so very, very strong for Eyes, but only a B for Sharp Fangs Encircle. And I've been meaning to get back to Encircle. In truth, I tried it once and I quite liked it, but I just never got back to it. And actually, I've been meaning to play Sharp Fangs for a long time as well. So this is certainly a matchup I'd be more than happy to play, especially to get Sharp Fangs on the channel, because I love Fangs. So that's going to be your sword and shield build. Potentially an easy, an S and a B, round about an A matchup overall. So that's your easy option. Second option is going to be your hard option, and this is going to be Downpour Drenches the World and Sunbright Whirlwind. This is your team passive. Your team sit around and move stuff around and probably not get rid of all that much plastic and maybe get overrun by what HME are doing. Some of the stuff that these spirits do can be very strong into HME. HME is quite susceptible to little moves and little controls and moving bits and pieces at the right time. So some of the what Downpour and Sunbright Whirlwind can do can be very good, but you also do need to get rid of plastic with HME, because you've got this problem where when they have multiple invaders in a land, it starts ravaging and things like that. So I can see how this can be tricky, because Whirlwind and Downpour do a lot of pushing and moving, less removing. So that's why I call this team passive. This is listed by Red as a Downpour as a B and Sunbright Whirlwind as a C. So for both spirits, it's their worst matchup, I believe he has listed. So two strong spirits. Potentially a very, very interesting matchup to see how they play. Downpour is obviously an extremely strong spirit, very close to S tier, I'd be quite interested myself actually to see how Downpour plays, particularly into HME. So that's your team passive. That's your hard matchup. Option 3 is your wildcard matchup, and this is going to be your Sun and Fire team, and it's going to be Relentless Gaze of the Sun. And finally, for the first time as an option on the channel, ThunderSpeaker. I think, is it Macross? I think one of the frequent commenters, apology if I got the name wrong, somebody has been waiting for ages for me to provide an option of ThunderSpeaker, and they're finally here. It is time for ThunderSpeaker, and it's ThunderSpeaker with the warrior aspect, which is not something I was necessarily initially planning. I checked the matchup axis, and we have for Sun, it's a B+, and for warrior, it's a B. So I think Sun, it's listed as Sun's worst matchup as well. Sun is obviously extremely strong as well. But here you've kind of got Sun and ThunderSpeaker. You've got a kind of an aggressive, damage-based kind of team. I don't love the warrior aspect. In truth, actually, I played it once and I didn't like it actually very much at all. I really like ThunderSpeaker and I love the design of ThunderSpeaker, but wasn't a huge fan of warrior. So I want to give warrior another chance, and here's an option for you to see me giving warrior another chance. I'd love to give it another chance. I'd love to love it. I'd love to really like it. So this is your wildcard matchup, and one I'd be really happy to play as well. I can see some benefits here of the Badlands and the synergies from Badlands from Sun together with the pings of damage from warrior could potentially be very strong. So some potentially really nice things going on there. Again, floating somewhere around the middle in terms of whether it's a good or bad matchup, not 100% sure, but certainly very interesting. So there's your three options. As I say, please do go over and hit the poll right after the end of this episode. But we are at the end of this episode. 2 minutes 54. If you've lasted up until now, just again, huge thank you for you being here. We're 15, 18, 20 past 3 in the afternoon. I better go and help with my family at some stage today. Just obviously before you do leave and go and vote on the poll, please do remember, if you did enjoy the episode, please hit the old like and share and all of those kind of good things which keep me going and help my metrics and help me continue doing what I'm doing, which is hugely appreciated. And if you'd like to as well, of course, drop a comment below and let me know, we're coming up and we're going to play HME next. Do you like HME? I'd love to hear your inputs on HME itself. Is there anything that you kind of enjoy about them or don't enjoy, or the usual stuff that I ask all the time? Do you have any good memories, any good games against them? Is there any spirits you like, spirits you don't like, all that kind of stuff? But that is it. I'm going to finally be able to take a breath. I'm finally going to be able to get up out of this roasting room and get away from the relentless gaze of this thing that's right in front of me here. So, as I say, thank you so much again for being here. But until the next time, may your manifestations be always powerful and glorious. See you then.